At this time, I'd like to have a motion for approval of the official agenda.
Vice Mayor, have you recognized?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to make a motion that we move items D and E under 11 board business up to items A and B under section 9, mayor's business.
Okay. There's been a motion by the gentleman from 5, Mr. Maynard, to move items D and E under Roman numeral 11, under Roman numeral 9, mayor's business. Those two items will become B and C. Do we have a second? The motion's been seconded by the gentleman from 3. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed is nay. Ayes have it, and motion is now carried. Any other amendments? Yes, sir, Mr. Adams, come forward, please, sir. You sure can. Come forward.
There is one item.
Yes, sir.
That is not for the board for consideration. Alderman Walker submitted it by the deadline. It was for the 18th agenda, but we opted to push it forward, and it did not make this agenda, and that is my fault. It's consideration of a resolution with NACTO, but we did not do an amended agenda because, of course, there's a board order that prohibits us from doing that, and it's not placed at the table now. But as it was in by the deadline, it's just an oversight on staff's part. We would, if the board is willing, like to place it.
Well, that certainly needs to be added. The gentleman from 4 got it in a timely manner. Do I have a motion for approval of that request?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and second, motion by the gentleman from 3, second by Alderman Nguyen to add the item to the agenda, and it will become the last item under board business, Roman number 10.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. May I approach and?
Yes, sir, you may approach. Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if there's no objection, I'd like to add a couple items to consent if there's no problems.
Okay, and all those in favor of that last motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed is nay. Ayes have it, motion is carried. I'm sorry, gentleman from 3.
I'd like to add the board minutes for consent, both those documents.
Object.
There's an objection will not be added. Do we have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved by the gentleman from 5 for approval of the agenda as to the remaining items. Their second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Nguyen. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed is nay. Ayes have it, and the agenda is approved. That now brings us down to approval of the Board of Alderman minutes. The first set of minutes is November 4, 2014. The Mayor Board of Alderman, we have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Been moved and approved by the gentleman from 3. Second
Second.
by the Alderwoman from 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed is nay. Ayes have it, and motion passes unanimously. The next matter is the consideration of the minutes of November 25, 2014. The gentleman from 1, Mr. Carr, will move for approval. Second.
Second.
Second from the gentleman from 3, Mr. Lill. All in discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed is nay. Ayes have it, the motion is carried. This now brings us down to the announcement and comments, the mayor's comments, the new employee introduction. I see there's a firefighter, Chief Man. Will you bring the new firefighter up and introduce him, please, sir? Okay. And I see at the place, Mr. Chief, it says that Carl Griffin is the new firefighter. The City of Starkville and the Starkville Fire Department would like to introduce Carl Griffin as our newest firefighter. Carl is originally from West Point, Mississippi. He attended East Mississippi Community College, where he took classes in advanced welding. Before joining the Starkville Fire Department, Carl worked for Equipment Incorporated as a technician. Carl has served as a volunteer firefighter with the Woodland Volunteer Fire Department for 8 years and served as chief of the department. Carl is the son of Teresa and Eddie Griffin. During his spare time, Carl enjoys cooking, training, playing with his Siberian Husky, Jake, and being a firefighter. Carl and his wife, Michelle, attended Macedonia Methodist Church. Please join me in welcoming Carl Griffin to the City of Starkville. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Thank you so much. I'm gonna recognize you just one minute. At this time, I see our mayor has arrived, and I'm gonna yield this chair and presiding part over to the mayor. Mayor, good to have you this evening. Thank you. We're down to the comments from the mayor.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Vice Mayor, for bringing the meeting to order, and
Yes,
I
sir.
apologize
Yes, sir.
for my tardiness.
Yes, sir.
I have no comments this evening. Are there any comments from the members of the board? Any comments from the members of Alderman Maynard?
Just one quick one. If you're shopping for Christmas, remember to shop local. Means a big deal to our local business owners, and means a great deal to the city as well.
Any further comments? Alderman Ball.
Even though the Starkville Yellow Jackets and the Mississippi State Bulldogs didn't make it no further, but we do deserve a hand. Put up a good fight, but we come up on the short end.
Our hearts were broken this weekend, but it was still a magical fall.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Nguyen.
I would like to say, if you all did not get a chance to attend the parade last night, the partnership could not asked and schedule it on a better day. We had such great weather. They really did a great job. So I want to say kudos to Ms. Gregory and her personnel over there, because we really had a great time. I was like a little kid in my police car. So thank you so much.
Further comments from the members of the board? Any further comments? Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll now hear citizen comments. At this time, any citizen wishing to be heard may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. A little housekeeping. We do have 3 public hearings scheduled tonight. So if you are scheduled, or if you are here to speak on any of the topics that are scheduled for a public hearing, this is an open forum, so you always can come forward, but I would encourage you to wait until the appropriate time when your matter is before the board for a public hearing, if you are here to address one of those topics. Mr. Turner?
All right, good evening to the mayor and board of Alderman. My name is Alvin Turner, Ward 7. We're in the time of year where people try to con people. All right, we would like for the department heads to kind of keep us abreast of any con that might be circulating from the police department all the way down. This time of year, people set to try to take advantage of people. And we appreciate it if any can to let us know. The people also would like the light that was taken down. It's getting scary and scary for the drivers. They would like for a light to be put back, if so, because the street is dark, you cannot see the pedestrian, and it's hard to see each other. And we also would like for everyone to be careful. This time of year, we have a lot of things that could go wrong. But let's just be on our P's and Q's.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Good evening, Jerome Nettles from ERA Town and Campus Realty on Main Street. I believe the board has received numerous communications regarding the proposed road closure that's on the agenda tonight for the western end of Main Street, and just reiterating what a burden that's going to be on the businesses. I did have a conversation with a contractor yesterday, and he told me, oh, it's mandatory, it's a must. I am asking the board to please consider nighttime work. Of course, the contractor does not want to do this. It's an inconvenience on them. Okay, it's not a safety issue, it's not anything else, it's an inconvenience. The scheduling can be done appropriately. I'm asking the board to please take that into consideration. It is a Christmas shopping season. Visibility, access for employees and for clients to get to customers or get to businesses, that is paramount in the success of a business. Asking a business not to have none of that for over a month is very, very difficult to accommodate. It's putting a major burden on the business owners. I believe the best compromise that can be reached is to maximize the visibility and the traffic in that area during the construction time. Yes, there will be times where the roads will have to be closed completely. I'm asking that the board enforce minimizing those and minimize the negative impact that the business owners are going to incur. I guess my best comparison to it would be to block the drive-through to McDonald's, ask the customers to park at Burger King and walk back to McDonald's to buy a hamburger. That's about what you're asking us to do. So please consider that when the motion's brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nettles. Further citizen comments?
Good afternoon, Calvin David. I spoke here last month about a trailer of mine that was stolen from the Starkville Sportsplex full of DJing equipment, it's lights and sounds. I was trying to see if you got a chance to look at that. Or
Mayor, may we recognize?
You may.
Mr. Daly, I think when you were here last, I think is my recollection, we indicated to you that the property of the parks is under the full jurisdiction of the Starkville Park Commission, and by law, they have complete authority over all matters and things and property under their jurisdiction. So have you, and not that we're trying to pass the buck in my opinion, but have you talked to the Park Commission?
I actually went to the board.
Right, well, they are the body that regulates it. That's just the law. Certainly, we sympathize with you for any problem you have. What did they tell you?
I mean, he really was, we ain't doing anything for you. You can do whatever, his exact word was, you can do anything you want. We're not doing anything for you. We're not even.
Right, and Mr. Attorney, I don't want to misspeak on the law with the board, but as my understanding, the law stands that all matters, property, effects, and things that happen within the jurisdiction of the park is under the authority of the commission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly.
Hi, my name is Lakendra Young. I'm a member at Starkville High School, and I'm with the Mayor's Youth Council. And so one of the things you have to do is come to the actual board meeting. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and listen.
Thank you. And you picked a good night. Packed that one.
Hi, my name is Evan Ware. I'm a part of the Mayor Youth Council also, and I'd like to thank you for letting me come here and talk to y'all. And Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Mr. Mayor? I appreciate you guys coming tonight. I know you've got a meeting tonight that was rescheduled from last night due to the Christmas parade. These guys do a lot of good stuff. I think recently I saw a couple out ringing the bell, for the Salvation Army over the weekend. And I know they're starting a fundraiser for a charity, and they're going to be selling raffle tickets. They're giving out tonight. So if any of these young youth approach you, that'd be a good thing for you to help participate in.
I'm Barbara Coleman. I'm one of the owners of Deja Vu Salon, and I just wanted to voice that we're pretty upset that we're going to be losing mainly parking spaces, and we would appreciate it if the work could be done at night also. It is a hindrance on our clients.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Further citizen comments? Are there any further citizen comments?
I'm Debbie Nettles, broker owner of ERA Town and Campus Realty, watching the wonderful facility neighbor go in across the street or in the curb from my company. And I know that most of you, if you don't, I will tell you, I've been a huge proponent and supporter of City Hall, our police department, our other first responders, and the City Hall complex. And of course, in reality, eventually, in the long run, it will enhance the value of my property. However, I am concerned about the now. I may not be around to see the finish, or any of us, but I am asking you, begging you. My taxes have gone up 100% in 9 years that I've been at my location. I still support the city of Starkville, our mayor, our alderman. I am asking you to seriously consider a lot of this work that can be done during non-business hours. Other cities have accomplished success in construction work at night with no injuries or fatalities to the workers. Yes, none of us like to work at night unless you're a mother, then you don't know the difference. But the city needs to seriously consider constituents who have and have not supported, but still have businesses on the west end of Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nettles.
Ms. Reynolds, what time do you open? Sorry, ma'am.
What time do I open?
Normal business hours, realizing you're there early and late, but normal business hours.
The normal business hours are 8 to 5.
Ms. Colton?
9 to 6. Yeah, but we can, 5 would work fine. We can manage to close by 10.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you've been by my office on Main Street, anywhere from 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, you generally will see an agent there. Not generally. At times, we'll see an agent there meeting on climbing. We used to meet before work or after work.
Further citizen comments? Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we have 3 public appearances scheduled tonight. The first is by Jennifer Gregory with a report from the partnership and presentation of the CVB budget.
That in a minute. Well, good evening, Mayor and Board, and thank you for having us this evening. We are here to present the budget for the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We do this every year for you guys to show you how we plan to spend our money that is allocated through the 2% food and beverage tax and the hotel tax. So as you can see, we have a comparison from last fiscal year to the current fiscal year we're in now. We've projected an increase in the hotel tax by about $1,500. We've had some interesting numbers come back from the hotel tax over the last couple of years. I've contacted the Department of Revenue. My guess is that a hotel might not have been paying on time, might not have been paying at all, and is now catching up. If you look at the numbers, we experienced extremely low revenue for several months, of which are typically our highest months, football season in particular. And then you saw those numbers really start to catch up in January of last year. You saw $20,000 and $30,000 months for revenue, which is not very typical. So we think that the hotel tax is increasing, but we've projected just a very minimal increase just because of those strange discrepancies that we experienced. In the expenses, you can see that the main increase to balance out that projected increase in revenue is for our audit, and that's basically to just reflect the actual expense of the audit. TE Law conducts a very extensive audit of our financials every year. Then looking down in the food and beverage tax, we have projected about an $8,000 increase in revenue. We did end the fiscal year with about a $40,000 surplus, so we think this is a pretty safe projection that it will probably surpass this, but just to be prudent, that was our projection. And the main increases in expenditures that you'll see are sponsored programs line item. That's where we actually allocate grants to other entities in the community. The Cotton District Arts Festival is a large recipient of funding. The Horse Park, the Oktibbeha County Heritage Museum, other entities like that that conduct events or manage quality of life type programs and events that support the CVB's goal and mission of creating an economic impact via tourism. So we accept applications for those grants every year. So that's just a reflection of what we have allocated. And then we also created a special projects line item of $5,300, basically just with the surplus of that projected revenue. And we have already used part of that and will continue to use it basically for things that sort of come up. Of course, the Mississippi High School Athletic Association is having their state football championship here this weekend. So we're spending some money to promote that and to help them with that. Additionally, when College Game Day was in town for the Mississippi State Auburn game, we purchased some banners and things like that just to make an impact when those film crews came into town. So that's sort of what that line item is for. Like I said, we did end the year with about a $40,000 surplus, and so we were very pleased with that. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you all have about the CVB budget.
Questions or comments from the members of the board for Ms. Gregory? Are there any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Gregory.
Thank you.
Our next public appearance is Jack Wallace from the Oktibbeha County Economic Development Authority. And he will also be presenting annual 2% budget.
Right. Mayor, board, good evening. I'm sorry I'm a month late, but my early demise was true. So I've been a little bit slow getting our budget to you. I apologize for that. You have a copy of it. We expect to take in $735,700 this coming year. We expect to spend that. We have three revenue sources. One, we invested in the land and the latest building that Mississippi State built, and from that we get 20% of the revenue for return. Secondly, we have the revenue from our multi-tenant building, which is full at the present time, other than one little small kitchen. And then thirdly, we have the 2% food and beverage money. Right now, we are full in the park with the opening of Ceasefire. That's the last lot we have that's developed land. We have about 70 acres north of the high performance laboratory, with about 70 acres, which we have not developed, of course. But we are full, and I don't know, I think there's 1,600 people working in that park. So it's been a great investment for our community. This year, we will fund the operation of OCEDA 1, 2. We intend to spend a considerable amount of money to upgrade our multi-tenant building, which is now about 27 years old. We have a real bad window problem, which I'll discuss the details to anybody who's interested, but it's going to cost a good bit to get that redone. So we expect to invest quite a bit into that. Secondly, we will be contributing $100,000 on the link contract that the city and county is involved in. And then we'll be doing other smaller items for industrial appreciation, etc. But we appreciate your support, and any questions you might have, I'm available anytime. Be glad to answer. But I would respectfully ask you to approve our budget.
Are there any questions or comments from the members of the board for Mr. Wallace? Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr.
And our final public appearance is by Jamie Bachman on behalf of Volunteer Starkville.
Good evening. I just wanted to come and let you all know what we've been doing for the last third and fourth quarter of our fiscal year 2014, which ended October 1st, 2014. Basically, I'm just going to highlight our major events during the past 4 months and our trainings that we've been hosting along with our upcoming events. Our Healthier You Summer Camp, this was our second year doing this in July, and we have an AmeriCorps Vista that's assigned to us that helps increase our staff capacity at no cost to Volunteer Starkville. If you're not familiar with the AmeriCorps Vista program, we have volunteers in service to America all over our nation, and it's organized by each state. And we've had Jonathan Reeves serving with us since last November, and his service term ended in November. Basically, these volunteers, they are placed with organizations to help alleviate poverty in different communities. They might be working with a certain organization like Starkville Bridges that totally focuses on alleviating poverty, or they might be focused with a volunteer center or organization of my kind that has programs that focus on this. And so one of his major projects is the Healthier You Summer Camp. The major improvement that we have made last year, this was the first time doing it, and we really didn't hit our target population. This camp is to give a summer camp experience to children from low-income families that might not have the money to enjoy a summer camp. We focus on financial literacy and health and nutrition. And so this year we partnered with the Starkville Housing Authority and Brick Fire Project to make sure we hit our target in youth participants. We served 103 youth overall during a 1-week period, and we had a consistency of 45 to 50 youth participants each day. 26 of those actually were there every day of the week, and then we just had some new ones pop in and out. We had 44 volunteers serving in this ongoing project during that week that served over 400 hours of service. Watermelon harvesting, have any of y'all done that? It is hard. I was not expecting it, but the great thing about engaging youth, and that's something I'm trying to do more and more sporadically each quarter, they have a lot of energy and they have just the heart to help. And so I worked with a great group of youth, a mixture of students from Starkville High School, and they went to a farm with us, with Society of St. Andrew, and we harvested over 1,000 watermelons, 200 of which came back to our community for food pantries, and the rest of them went to the Memphis Mid-South Food Bank. So we had 12 volunteers that served over 100 hours of service that day with a lot of hard labor. That's kind of how we finished out our summer. We began our fall with the 9/11 Day of Service and Remembrance. We had volunteers from the fire department and the police department read to local children from Emerson, and they got to, ask all these questions to the firemen and police officers about their job. Our Serving Those Who Serve Us project, where we engage volunteers at local first responder units trying to give back in a unique way. We went to 2 county fire stations, the firing range, and Fire Station 1 was our local youth spot. Basically, they just help clean the facilities. These are facilities that do get cleaned, but not as often as like the city fire stations, and wash the vehicles. Our 9/11 ceremony and awareness fair, a great tribute to our local first responders and military in our area, as well as a tribute to those associated with 9/11. And our awareness fair in the end it featured different organizations that had services in first response, disaster preparedness, and volunteer opportunities. And then our first responder postcard service project, another way we engage youth in the fall, where they get to create a custom postcard for a first responder. And all of our first responder units in Ottawa County each first responder received a postcard. So overall, we engaged over 500 volunteers for 9/11 Day of Service that served 568 service hours. Make a Difference Day. This is a National Day of Service in October. It's generally held the 4th Saturday in October, but being in a college town, we get to work with MSU's schedule, and with that being fall break, me and the Maroon Volunteer Center always tried to adjust, and we did that on October 18th. We just did a small service project with cemetery beautification and Oddfellows, where 28 volunteers helped out the Starkville Cemetery Association with painting bollards and various other beautification efforts. And the great day about this day of service, I probably had 6 other nonprofits that had service projects going on and engaging. So that day of service has really increased since last year. Mentoring Matters. This is our very first community mentor training that Volunteer Starkville hosted. And the whole point, we have about 13 different nonprofits that have after-school programs or in-school programs that need tutors and mentors. And mentoring is an art, and we have 6 local experts that are associated with mentoring in some fashion that put on a wonderful training focusing on various topics of mentorship. And what I loved about this was we had 20 volunteers that attended a 2-hour training. They got some wonderful information. They got a handbook on mentoring, and then I actually matched them based on their interest street to a local mentoring program that matched their interests and skills. And so they immediately started volunteering about 2 weeks after the training. And then our volunteer management training for nonprofits. I've been working really hard over the past 2 years developing a volunteer management training for nonprofits in our area. I'm a nonprofit myself, so I know how tight the budget is, and we have some wonderful sponsors that provide these trainings in kind at no cost to our nonprofits. And what's exciting to me is I had about an average of maybe 5 to 7 participants in each of the trainings And this year, that well then doubled among my nonprofits. And we walk you through the volunteer management process. And Jason, I keep thinking back through this whole thing about the design process and landscape architecture, and there's really an art to it. If you skip a step, you are not as effective in the end. Your design's not as great, and your volunteer management skills are not great, and your volunteer program can falter. So seeing the nonprofits in town really take on to that and really see it being beneficial, I see that program growing and excited to see where it goes next year. And then this is just, you can see this better in the handout that you were provided, but it's kind of a snapshot of how we've grown over the past 4 years. When I started, we were, serving, I guess, at the end of fiscal year 2012, I got us to 62, but we were about serving that 30 nonprofits, and now we've grown to serving 128 different organizations, helping them recruit volunteers and so forth. We've engaged over 2,300 volunteers this past year in our service events alone, and then over 18,000 volunteers I've been able to document among our nonprofits serving in our community, and documenting over 117,000 service hours. And so if you multiply that by the independent sector's value, $19.35 an hour for one volunteer hour, that's over $2 million being put back into our community through service, and I think that's outstanding to say for our community. I think that's about it. Things that have just happened: Family Volunteer Day, y'all get to hear about that in my next presentation in a few months. Be looking for the MLK Day of Service. We'll have our community volunteer fair and so forth. National Volunteer Week, our annual recognition banquet, and Touch a Truck coming up in the spring. And then Taylor said that I could go ahead and, y'all got this in your packets, I think, with my banner request. I've been talking with Miss Vicki Lowry and Jeff Lyles a good bit, trying to understand the whole process and going through the right, and they suggested I just request, I think I have 3 events on there, that I'm requesting banners be put up in the community for Martin Luther King Touch a Truck on September 11th. I provided the requested locations of banners, the dates that they would be hung, and I've provided letters of support from the property owners. So if y'all would just consider that, I would
Are
appreciate
you
it.
requesting a fee waiver?
Well, Mr. Jeff and Vicki said that because I'm a nonprofit, the fee's already waived, but I needed to get permission from the Board of Aldermen to actually display banners in these locations. In the past, I thought I just had to go through them, and I think they just scooted it on the rug and said, yeah, just go ahead. But he told me the proper process was to go before the Board of Aldermen and request permission for these specific locations.
Does the board wish to address that issue at this time? Alderman Maynard.
You're not talking about banners hung over the street, right? You're talking about, you're putting banners out on the.
Banners out on the thing. I did, because Mr. Jeff used the, the Alzheimer's walk as an example. He said that there was a banner strung over Main Street. I am requesting for these 3 events that y'all consider that one, but if you decline it, I'll be happy with the other locations just the same.
That's the reason that's not before you tonight. As you know, any request to hang a banner across Main Street requires tabulation of in-kind services. We've not been able to take that to, we've not been able to run that for our departments at this point to present that to you. So, were it not for that, had we had that to present, we would have had this on the agenda tonight, but we do not have those in-kind services for you, so we didn't.
None of these in the next 2 weeks, right?
No, the first one's in January, like 3rd week of January.
Sure, we've got these numbers just for a team, we just need to run it through community development, to route it back to you for the agenda.
Take care of that, thank you.
Are there any questions or comments for Ms. Bachman for the members of the board? Alderman Wynn.
Ms. Bachman, thank you so much for all that you do for our community. And secondly, I want to thank you. We got your thank you card a couple of weeks ago, so I put it in my little file to remember to bring it tonight and say thank you so much for writing us and thanking us. Thank you.
Alderman Carver.
Also, thank you for everybody from the community. I mean, what you do is see those numbers grow over the last 4 years exponentially, and what you've done is you've always found a way to, I guess, put your fingers in every kind of community member. You don't just target one individual or any kind of one purpose. It's interesting to see this evolve and what you've been able to do. And you just kind of work between many different groups, and what you do is a great thing, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board?
Say excellent work, Ms. Bachman, and also to the CVB for all the work that you all do, and OCEDA, thank y'all very much for all the hard work and the dedication to our community.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Bachman. All right, the next matter that you have before you is the second public hearing on potential changes to the animal control ordinance as recommended by the Cemetery Committee and revised by the city attorney. Alderman Maynard, would you like to introduce?
Yeah, this is the second public hearing. We are responding with this public hearing to a request from the Cemetery Association. Ms. Coker is here. Basically, their recommendation was to disallow domesticated animals on the property of any cemetery owned and or maintained by the city of Starkville.
Are there any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments prior to hearing public comments? Alderman
Reading my
Carter.
packet, that was the only line I saw different, was the red line. Is there anything else that's been?
City attorney.
There's not, Alderman Carver. I changed that one line.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll now hear any public comments on the matter. Anyone wishing to come forward may be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Good evening, my name is Alderman Turner, Ward 7. We take you all out of the government body. You have to give respect to give respect. I'm the oldest boy of 4 kids. I had 2 brothers. I had to set an example for them. One is 50, one is 52. I just turned 55. But we had more than value. You have to respect people to give respect. Now, if I was caught in the cemetery, I'd go to jail. But it's a shame that animals would disrespect the cemetery. The resting place are dead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Any further comments on the proposed changes to the animal control ordinance? Any further comments?
I'm Charlotte Coker, President of the Starkville Cemetery Association. I want to thank y'all for considering making this change to the animal ordinance. This came after the Cemetery Association got many calls from people who had family in Oddfellow Cemetery in particular, and we have spent many hours there working with volunteers to try to beautify the cemetery, which we hope to continue to do. But it's evident because of the placement of the 2 cemeteries on University Drive in such close proximity to a huge population of young people who obviously have not learned yet what respect for those who have left this earth is, that we need something that tells them that having their animals not just use the cemetery as a place of elimination, but also a place of play, of animals scratching graves and everything like that. Is the reason we consider this very strongly and wanted to ask the board to modify the animal ordinance in that way. So thank you again for considering this.
Thank you, Ms. Coker. Any further comments? Any further comments on the revisions to the animal control ordinance?
Mayor and Board, I'm Lynn Sproul, Ward 3, and I certainly respect that space that is the cemetery should be respected. I don't, however, think that adding another layer of ordinance that is already problematic to enforce, which is i.e. dogs on leashes, which they should be, and picking up after your dogs, which you should do and is already on the books, enhances this at all by creating a space that is no longer welcome to the public. I think that people walk their dogs and that places of reflection allow for that just as well as the sidewalks do. There are finite spaces left in this cemetery. And if you lose the value of the public in those cemeteries, then it will potentially fall into disrepair like the Brush Arbor Cemetery did. I think there are places for the living, which includes family members that perhaps are four-legged, and I don't think that it's disrespectful to walk your dog in a cemetery. I also would like to say that if Arlington Cemetery thinks it's okay, that it certainly should be good enough for Oddfellow Cemetery and for Brush Arbor, which are all city-owned cemeteries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spruill. Further comments on the proposed revisions to the animal control ordinance? Any further comments?
Hi, Sandra Sistrunk, Ward 2. I wanted to make the same point that several have already made. There is an ordinance in place right now, and it requires your animals to be on a leash. It requires you to pick up after your animals. And so there are all the enforcement opportunities that you need if you want to make enforcement the focus of this. The sentence that's being added doesn't bring anything new to the table other than specifically excluding pets from cemeteries. It doesn't address service animals, whether or not you could bring a service animal to a funeral or to visit a grave. And it doesn't bring anything new to the enforcement. It also is probably not going to be something that the people who are currently being problems are going to know about, and it's not going to change their behavior. I do think that there are much better courses of action to add the doggy bag pickup stations, to add some signage, to help people to be aware of the ordinance. I know that we mail the ordinance out every year in the electric bill, but I'd be willing to bet that most of that never gets read. So it's an education issue, it's an ownership issue. If it's an enforcement issue, there's everything there that's already needed to enforce it. I would encourage y'all to take the opportunity to take the comments you've gotten tonight, the comments you've gotten previously, under advisement, and find some way to meaningfully change this so that that the respect that the Cemetery Association and Ms. Coker is hoping to have will be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sistrunk. Further comments on the proposed revisions to the animal control ordinance? Any further comments? Yeah, but seeing as there's not a rush of comments.
I might point out that in our recommendation letter, we recommended that nice signs like the quality that have been put up for the smart bus system be put around the cemetery, notifying people at each one of the entrances that pets would no longer be allowed in the cemetery, other than in our recommendation that service dogs would be allowed in the cemetery. Also, we asked that new people coming into town be notified, and that the landlords who own the majority of the property around the cemetery notify the residents of the change to the ordinance, because most of the board of the Cemetery Association are retired people from the university who've worked with thousands of students and realize that the population that mainly walks in that cemetery with their dogs are people who know one thing, yes or no. They're not people that understand a lot of modification to an ordinance. So that's the reason we felt strongly that the only way to really solve the problem that's going on there now, and it is particular to Oddfellows on the south side of University Drive, but with all the thousands of hours people have put in to try to beautify that and to augment what the city's doing with the cemetery, we felt like this ordinance, to change the ordinance, and also the educational part that we added in our recommendation, could greatly help the cemetery be a nicer place for the people who visit it on a daily basis.
Thank you, Ms. Coker. Any further comments on the proposed revisions to the animal control ordinance? Any further comments? Any further comments? Seeing none, that will conclude this, the second public hearing on potential changes to the animal control ordinance. And the next matter that you have before you is a public hearing on a recommendation of rezoning with conditions of approximately 326 acres of property north of Highway 182 and east of Highway 25 to M1. And Mr. Sanders, could you please make your way to the front and introduce the matter?
Joel, I think Joey may have larger signs, maybe easier to see. I don't know what he's got there.
Hey, Joey, I think he's got
Joey,
some additional
yeah.
information he's gonna put on the board.
Just slide it up this one.
Joey.
You really wanna see what he's got?
At its October meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission considered a rezoning request from the Golden Triangle Development Link to rezone 326 plus or minus acres located north of Martin Luther King Drive or Highway 182 and east of Highway 25 from multiple zones C2, R3, R5, and RE to M1 or industrial or the Innovations Industrial Park. And this is what the applicant is proposing. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval with two conditions. If the property were to be rezoned M1, buffer yards would be required per landscape ordinance section 8, buffer yard screening and manufacturing from other uses. And also as developed sites would need to comply with the current zoning requirements. There has been a petition filed with 20% of the property owners within 160 feet of the border area signing the petition. So any decision for approval will need a supermajority vote. The appeal was noticed in the Starkville Daily on November 10th, and a letter was mailed on November the 3rd. Are there any questions?
Any questions or comments from the members of the board for Mr. Sanders? Are there any questions or comments from Alderman Walker?
Mr. Sanders, can you just confirm and let that this is a zoning decision, and what you're showing here is a plan that making a zoning decision and a zoning change is a standalone entity, and that even though if this is to be rezoned to M1, that this may very well not be the plan that is produced, but it would have to, whatever is developed would have to meet the requirements of the M1 zoning. Is that correct?
That is correct. And as with any rezoning application, the applicant is only required to submit a layout of the property boundaries, not of the any proposed development. That is not to be considered at any rezoning request.
further questions or comments from the members of the board? Are there any further questions or comments from the members of the board? All right, seeing none, we will move into the public comment portion of the public hearing. This process works a little bit differently than the ordinance public hearing process because we have on each side of the issue in a rezoning case that has been appealed. So in this case, we do have appeal.
This is a formal appeal?
It is.
Okay.
So in this case, we'll hear from the applicant first, and then we'll hear from the appealing parties, which in this case is the adjacent homeowners. And each side will have 15 minutes allotted to make your presentation. Now, this typically is easier for the applicant because the applicant is typically one party. So I would assume that there are two of you here. You'll either split your time between the two of you or one of you will speak for the entire 15 minutes. It gets a little more difficult with the adjacent property owners because there are more of you. So what I would ask you to do is decide amongst yourselves if you want to allocate a large portion of that time to one individual to represent you or to a couple of individuals. If you don't otherwise direct me, I will keep a running clock when people come to speak, and when you reach the 15-minute mark, both of you will be notified. So we'll hear first from the applicant. You will have a maximum of 15 minutes.
Sure. Oh, thank you. Chris Pate, Jones Walker, outside counsel for the Golden Triangle Development Link. As Alderman Walker brought up a minute ago, this is a mock-up of sort of a plan for the proposed Starkville Innovation District Park that's been in before this board before, and in the media. We started this process of identifying the property for this park and commencing discussions with the city and the county over a year ago. The bond issue for both, a $5 million bond issue to be issued by both the city and the county to fund land acquisition for the park and public infrastructure to go in to develop the park has already been approved. We undertook the zoning petition at that direction as sort of the next step in this process to go ahead and have the zoning converted from largely C2 general business and some RE, I think R3 and R5 to M1 industrial. Just very, very quickly, I know there has been some discussion, there was some discussion at the last meeting about, what might be out there. Mr. Higgins and Mr. Deason with the link talked about, the purpose here is to develop this park to host advanced manufacturing businesses, to develop jobs in the city and to develop new sources of largely property tax revenues and some sales tax revenues. Today, the majority of that property is C2. Just for the quick update for the folks that are here for public comment and for the board's purposes. Today, on that same property, the owners could put in a large warehouse and distribution facility, like a big Walmart distribution facility, a system distribution facility, any large warehouse and commercial distribution facility. A large wholesaler could go in there. Car dealerships could go onto that property today, or a significant portion of it. So what we're seeking to do is modify that existing zoning a step further to change it from the existing zoning to M1 industrial to allow us to also put advanced manufacturing centers into the park. We have, I won't take up the full 15 minutes. Mayor, to your point, we'll keep it short. I just wanted to be recognized. I think Mr. Sanders had submitted the petition and the exhibits that we had submitted at the zoning hearing into the record for tonight's hearing. I want to be sure that had been acknowledged and was part of the record. But with that, we would ask for a supermajority vote of the board this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Page.
Certainly.
And we'll offer an opportunity for questions or comments from the board once we've heard from both parties.
Very good.
All right, at this time, do we have anyone appealing the decision who wishes to be heard?
That's it.
You may.
My name is Rob Robertson. I would not dare say I speak for everyone, but I do speak for a pretty good many of these people that are up here for your consideration. We do appreciate you guys taking this on. And the first thing I'd like to say is that the people that I've talked to, including myself, we're not against this project. We're not. We just want some protections and some consideration just like anyone else would have. Right now, there's nothing that states that there has to be a buffer zone or anything like that. Now, I will say that I've had a really good conversation with Mr. Denson. Everything I've heard from him, I like. He's really interested in making these neighbors happy, and he wants to be a good neighbor, and we want to be a good neighbor. But the thing that has to be considered here is you're going from, some of this property, true enough, is commercial, but some of it's not. And I've heard it said that, you know, anything could pop in there as commercial. Well, anything hasn't popped in there. We're talking about an industrial park here. And all we want is some safeguards. This is not a unfixable situation by any stretch. Matter of fact, it's pretty easy. I know that when the property across the street came up for rezoning, we actually, as a community, came together and had a compromise, and I think there was like a 200-foot buffer, a 300-foot buffer. I can't even remember exactly what it was, but the buffer was set up for trees to be planted and left, and that buffer zone to not be touched. I don't think there's anyone in this room that doesn't think we need jobs in this community, and that's really important to all of us. But on the same token, there is a neighborhood on one side of that this could affect, and there's a few houses on the other side that this can affect. If you'll look at this map here, if you look at the very bottom, and you see where it kind of makes a upside down V at the bottom, that's me. I'm surrounded. That would seem like it would be a great thing if at some point we want to sell that property. But to sell that property, you have to have a buyer. And as the zoning around us changes, my house is being devalued. Now, the land itself may go up in value, and that's a great thing, and I'm excited about that side of it. But in the meantime, I've got to live there. And I don't think it's too much to ask, just like anyone else has asked, and just like just about everything I've seen come before this board, or come before the zoning board, has had some sort of buffer or some kind of connector there with that. And I don't think that the people that are pushing this project are against that. What I would ask, though, is for the minutes, as this is taking hold and is going to be in effect, the minutes reflect that there was some thought here that we're going to put a buffer in here and a requirement that buffer is done. Now, keep something in mind. There's been buffers put on almost every project that I've seen lately, including the commercial, just commercial. But now we're talking about industrial. And I realize that what we're shooting for is not a tire company to come in there. But we don't know what's going to go in there. We really don't. I do believe that we have some of the finest people in the state that's going to bring some good people into this project. But there are no guarantees of that right now, and we don't know what that is. So as a community and as someone that owns property here who lives here, I would ask that we get the same consideration that anyone else is going to get with a buffer and some trees. And I don't honestly think that that's beyond the scope of what they would be for or against. I think that this process puts us in a situation where it seems like an us against them kind of situation. That's not what the deal is here. We really want to be good neighbors to this project, but we also want some consideration and have them be good neighbors to us. The neighborhood to, let's see, there's a neighborhood at the top of this map And there's probably at least 20 or 30 houses over there that are gonna be affected by this. And then you have a couple of houses on the other end that's gonna be affected by this. This is not unfixable by any stretch of the imagination. A simple buffer zone for the houses that are there, I would ask for a 300-foot buffer. But this is left up to this board. If this were your home, wouldn't you want one? Thank you. Y'all have any questions for me?
We'll take those then. Thank you, Mr. Robertson. How much time? Okay. So there are 10 minutes remaining for anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the rezoning.
My name is Louis Dawkins. I don't have a lot to add, but I do want to support what Rob has said. My son and I own about 4 acres of property right here. It's about 860 lineal feet. And I made a presentation to the zoning commission, by the way, who just previously considered the property on North Jackson last time they met. And they put in 6 or 7 conditions. And we asked that the zoning commission put in some conditions in the rezoning of this. Again, we're not against it, but we'd like to have 2 things happen. We'd like to have the value of our property protected and the quality of life protected. My backyard and the north side of that property is heavily wooded. And if that disappears, then my quality of life is significantly changed. And the zoning commission chose to not put in any conditions, which I see is quite inconsistent in their actions the last time they did. And so I would ask the board to think about what could possibly happen if that were your property and there are no conditions there. And again, as Rob says, we want to be a good neighbor, but we want our property values protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawkins. Are there any further comments in opposition to the proposed rezoning? Any further comments? Any further comments? All right, seeing none, that will conclude the comments by the parties in the rezoning matter. We'll hear any questions or comments from the members of the board.
I've got a couple from Mr. Robertson, I guess, and this may not be the best place to do it, Mr. Deason. On the west side of Mr. Robertson's property, that little sliver, I've always wondered, I guess what we're looking at is this little bit, what is this, what purpose is this?
None whatsoever, other than the fact that it was part of the deal.
Right.
You couldn't purchase part of the land for the Starks. There's no plans to put anything there at this point in time.
So, oh yeah.
So it's land that we had to buy because of the deal, but it's
Understand.
not land that's technically ever gonna be used for any purpose.
So that'll kind of serve as a buffer on the
That would be
west.
a buffer as well.
And the way I understand it's going now, in the construction phase, I guess what we're gonna call on the northwest, is that the way that that you think it's gonna design out from the north side working down? And then once it's finalized, the entrance to the east of Mr. Robertson's property will be which one's gonna be the main entrance?
Well, the main entrance is gonna be here off of Highway 25.
Yes, sir.
Here on the west side. And obviously, what we propose to be built out would be the road, the sidewalks, the landscaping, and the lighting, okay? All of these proposed little buildings, those are nothing but conceptual at this time, okay? All the roads that you see, all the buildings, those are conceptual as well, because that's gonna be dependent upon each individual prospect. Now, when you get a prospect in the room and you take them out here and you show them the park, I'm not gonna tell a prospect, you have to choose number 3 to begin with. It may be that they choose site 10 to begin with, or site 8 to begin with. At that point, it's what works best for the prospect and what works within the park.
Okay. Thank you. Also, I'm kind of leaning toward just seeing if we could, and I don't know how late in the ball game this is, but if you were to have a 200-foot buffer, it looks like there's a FEMA, does that say FEMA 100-year flood zone
It
around
is.
the whole eastern side?
It is the blue area.
Is that a natural buffer that's going to have to exist on the whole eastern side?
It is.
So how many feet is that?
Probably half mile.
So I would say right now we've got a buffer on the western side of Mr. Robertson's, not on the eastern side, but we do have a natural buffer that's going to occur on the whole eastern border, and then where it starts going up in the northeast corner, does that come over that line at all, or will there be no buffer there? Is that that's
It's
Josie Creek?
the intent of the link. At this point, I think it was Mr. Dawkins talked about trees. That's the way the park is designed as it is. If you'll notice, everywhere that we have a facility, it's where there are no trees. And that's by design, so that when you come around the corner, you might not see this company here or this one until you come past the next set of trees. So it's our intention not to take down as few trees as possible. When the link came on board almost 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, you guys contracted with us to go out and create jobs and create investments in this community. And I agree with Alderman Maynard, shop local. But what I want to do here in this case is I want to keep good quality jobs here local as well. We also want to be good neighbors because we understand what that means as well. I've had great conversations with the residents, and I think something that may help everybody's fears is the fact that we're going to have some CCRs probably within the next month, and it's our intention to bring those CCRs back to this board for their review. Not only this board, but also for the county supervisors as well. And I think some of those issues will be addressed at that point.
And just for those who don't know the term CCR, I'm restrictive covenants on the entire project site. That will not only restrict certain types of developments that we don't want out there, but also prescribe facades for buildings, so it's an attractive park.
And we keep hearing the word industrial. There again, what we're referring to here is advanced manufacturing is what our goal is, okay? And I was telling Rob and Ms. Sheridan earlier, yesterday or the day before, the reason that this park is here, the reason this park is designed as it is because this park really is not designed to compete against our Lowndes County brother or our Clay County sisters. We don't have the power, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the land, okay? What we do have is a university here that is next to this park that we will be able to benefit from. So the type of industries that we bring in here are not gonna be a rubber factory or a chicken rendering factory. All of those things with regards to perimeters, with regards to noise, with regards to berms, with regards to greenery, all of those things will be addressed in our covenants and restrictions.
It's a big trend now I do a lot of economic development work in the state, and every new industry looking to build a development, if there's existing vegetation, forest, nobody wants to cut that down. In the same way that neighborhoods around that area don't want to have to see their facility, that industry and business wants a buffer against their neighbors. So very much the trend has been, leave as much existing forest and vegetation in place, take up the land that's necessary, and that's it.
That's what I was going to ask you. So in my mind, looking at this, let's say I'm a homeowner on the northern side. That's my biggest concern right now, looking at that project, would be that northern side. Is it too late in the ballgame? This may be a question for our mayor or somebody that's been dealing with this on a daily basis, but is this too late in the ballgame, or will we wait to the CTR to, do y'all foresee that we could put 100 or 200-foot buffer in there, or is that just out of the ball?
I think that's something we'll address in the covenants and restrictions.
And this is a little bit of a different scenario, because here we don't have a private developer coming in asking for zoning to come in and do whatever it is they want to do. This is an undertaking by the city, by the county, and by OCEDA to develop a park. The city and the county are going to have input into what those park rules are, what those restrictions are, and I would imagine they're not going to want to allow anything that would have a negative impact on the neighborhood or the local residents.
Alderman Carver, I know you can't probably see me, but here with Plat 3, you have a 60,000 square foot and an additional 60,000 square foot facility. What we envisioned just quickly off the cuff was potentially moving those closer, and then possibly putting the parking to the side of it, okay? Which would create an additional buffer as well.
Yes, sir.
Along with the vegetation, the trees, and earthen berm if required.
Alderman Little? Or did you, Alderman Carver, were you finished?
Mr. Robertson and Mr. Dalton, I appreciate your comments earlier. Yeah, I believe your son Robin, I guess, couldn't be here tonight. He'd messaged me earlier. He had a conflict and was out recruiting with Mullen, but he had a concern about the buffer, as you mentioned, on that northern side. I think it's Cedar Creek Lane. And I don't think it's an unreasonable concern. And I think the merit there goes, if we're going to approve this tonight, or M1, and then we're going to wait and see the covenants later, it kind of, it's kind of after, it's backdooring it. And I can appreciate they're needing some assurance. And I know Joe Max, when he was here and presented all this, their goal is, like you said, to leave everything as undisturbed as possible within reason, But for those areas like around Mr. Robertson's property, which looks like that's basically unusable property there on the left, you never know, he needs some sort of assurance. And there on that north side, to go ahead and confirm tonight, maybe some reasonable buffer, 100 foot, 150 foot, if that works. You've got the natural floodplain buffer on the east side, and then whoever purchases that property next door knows what's there.
That's all we're asking.
I don't think that's an unreasonable request. What do you think the link, or what, this is your deal.
My point is, I would hate to attach an encumbrance of 150 feet today, when in reality, it might be 200 on that north side, or 250. I think that's when we bring those restrictions back, you guys can comment on those at that point and take a review of them, okay? It's your money.
Mr. Mayor?
City Attorney's asked to be recognized.
And I've interjected just to clarify the record. Mr. Sanders, I'm looking at the staff report, and it says that conditions were attached by the Planning and Zoning Commission, correct?
That is correct.
And the first condition was that if the property were to be rezoned to M1, a buffer yard would be required per Landscape Ordinance Section 8 and screening of manufacturing from other uses. So the money question is, what would Section 8 require for this project?
Our buffer yard requirements are performance-based. They're depending upon adjacent land uses. And just looking and thinking of other different types of manufacturing facilities and adjacent properties in the area, you're looking at a 40-foot wide type D buffer yard.
Per Section 8?
Yes.
So as of right now, the issue before the board is a 40-foot buffer.
That's correct. Anything, essentially, if it was developed, if this innovation park was developed as shown today, it would require a 40-foot buffer around all of the property.
And of course, the board would have discretion tonight to accept that condition or reject that condition, to increase the buffer or decrease the buffer.
That would be correct.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Alderman
I have
Walker.
a question for City Attorney Latimer. While it is true that you're going to bring a CCR that's going to have covenants in it, could you recall what it says in the contract? Because what I remember reading is that while we may comment, I'm not sure that we're going to have a whole lot of decisions to be made on those types of specifics.
For enforcement power, from the city standpoint, a buffer would need to be attached as a condition to the rezoning.
If I may, I can interject one thing. The city does hold the ultimate power, and that's the restriction of funding.
That's true. The purse strings.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Alderman Maynard.
Mr. Deason, Mr. Sanders, the current says 40 feet for the buffer. Is that correct?
A Class A use and a Class D use would require a low-intensity use and a high-intensity use. A buffer yard of 40 feet would be required between those two uses.
What about between a low-density use in that residential area?
It would probably be a type B, which would be 20 feet. But generally with manufacturing, my staff and I have the viewpoint that it would be a Class D buffer yard.
And that would be
40 feet.
Mr. Deason, do you see any hindrance on your part if we expanded that 40 feet to a 100-foot buffer?
There
moving
again,
north?
without having the full knowledge of my engineer's reports and for the actual water, sewer, and the roads and how that would curve, and if we change the cost estimates, I probably couldn't make a firm comment tonight on that. But obviously, we know it's a 20-foot buffer or a 40-foot, depending upon what type usage it is. And if you look, and I'll ask Mr. Dawkins, how many trees do you think are back there? Is it 3 yards, 5 yards, 10 yards of trees?
No, much larger.
Okay,
Much
so
larger.
just by virtue of the trees themselves, you probably already have a 100-foot buffer.
At least.
At least.
I think that's what they're.
Do you yield?
Well, and while I appreciate that, I also understand from their perspective, things can change. And I think we need the assurance, if we're gonna vote on this tonight, we need the assurance there's gonna be a significant buffer there in a worst case scenario. And I guess that's why I throw the question back to you again.
Well, and I'll throw it back to the board again, because obviously, if you think that it should be 100 feet, then that's what you should do in all your expert opinions. But what I would say is that we're going to bring it back to the board with recommendation. Would you suggest 100 foot all the way around? Is it just at the north side? Is it just where the homes are today? Is it, I mean, what does that look like? Is it only on parcel 3?
Alderman Maynard, do you yield?
Yeah, you.
Alderman Lip.
As I mentioned earlier, I think at this point, around Mr. Robertson's property lines and on that north side for Cedar Creek residents, it's not going to impact the east side or the west side, and anyone purchasing that property on the west side knows what's adjacent, M1. So I don't know that we'd need it applicable to those zones. Mr. Dawkins, what sort of, and Mr. Robertson, what sort of buffer were y'all hoping for? 50 feet, 30 feet, 100?
It's inconceivable to me that it'd be less than 100 feet. And I appreciate the fact that if we tie their hands, they don't have the flexibility. And if we ask for 100, they might give us 200. And so we're cutting our nose off to spite our face. We're just asking for some kind of a more than verbal conversation that our names are protected. And when I get up in the morning, I've got a bird sanctuary back there. I'd love to protect that bird sanctuary.
I understand. I don't think 100 foot would be unreasonable. Is that going to hinder the links in having a buffer like that on those areas around the?
Which areas?
Around the Robertson property and the north side,
So basically.
the Cedar Creek residents.
Here and here.
That's right. That'd be a 100-foot buffer in those specific areas be unreasonable?
I mean, as Joey said earlier, I guess our challenge is without having engineers sit down and look at the exact location, put this thing on a plan, and look at it. If they come back and they say, we could easily do an 89-foot buffer and not have to change anything. You hate to have committed and have it on the record that it's 100 foot when 89 foot would have been okay with it.
And I'd like the board to keep in mind as well, today it's a 20-foot buffer. And I could put a car dealership right here and take down the woods. I could put a Walmart distribution center there today, 20 feet from the line. But we're not going to do that. That's why we're proposing to bring back the CCRs for you guys to review it once we've had professionals take a look at it. As I understand it, tonight is obviously you're hearing the appeal. I think we're asking you to approve the rezoning, bring back the CCRs. You ultimately hold the purse strings and can approve or not approve at that point.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Deason, you mentioned bringing back the CCRs, and Mr. Page, jump in on this. You know, my 6 or 7 years in this seat, restrictive covenants have never come before the board because that's normally a private document between individual landowners. So how would the city have oversight over those documents?
Well, the city's gonna have the authority to have input into the development of those CCRs before they ultimately go. I think the plan right now, unless I'm thinking, is that ultimately OCEDA will be the title owner of the property.
But the city would have no express enforcement power of those covenants because the city wouldn't be a party to that deal.
The city would not be a party to those deals, but to the actual CCRs. They would ultimately be enrolled in the land records by OCEDA with the input and recommendation of the city and county.
So just to sum up, legally, with respect to the rezoning and conditions attached to the rezoning that the board can enforce, tonight is the ball game on that issue.
That's correct.
Alderman Carver.
First of all, I think knowing Joe and knowing the kind of person you are, I mean, I'm gonna make a motion tonight when we go through. I think 100-foot through conversations is a great place to start. I think that if Joe can get y'all 200 feet, he's gonna get you 200 feet. I don't doubt that. I think that what conversations we've had, he's gonna develop in areas around the tree breaks or the tributaries or whatever you wanna call them. But, you know, the 100 after it leaves our hands tonight, you know, the CTRs, we're not gonna really have any legal binding. So you'll see that motion coming, but I think as constituents, you know, that gives y'all some kind of assurance, and I know Mr. Deason's gonna do the best he can for you, so. The only place I had, that was the only thing I had in question. I'm kind of discounting this until future development, but, you know the measurements coming in basically at that pinch point. Everything else is.
I would say this, if that 100 feet is limited to the location of structures, I think that poses far less of an issue than, you know, we could, I'm just looking at
Property line to structure.
and an eyeball, that road is probably right at 100 feet, maybe a little shy of it, maybe a little more than that. But, you know, if the concern is how close these facilities are going to be to the line, 100 feet, particularly up here, I don't think would be an issue at all.
That's the only really problem area is the northern side of
But we can push this down and push parking around the side.
Today, these proposals are already on here at a little over 100 feet as they do this today.
All right,
Here is probably 300, 400 feet from the property line, from the building. Here again, I don't want everyone to get hung up on where they're placed exactly on here today. 100 foot obviously makes the citizens and the neighborhood feel well, and it's the alderman's wish, then I think that's something that we can move forward with.
All right, I've got Walker, then Little.
I think one potential solution to this, as opposed to saying at this point a firm 100 feet, is if we look to say the property to the north, what is currently zoned lots 1, 3, and what is currently labeled lots 1, 3, and 5. I think if you said over that distance, it has to the average has to be 100 feet. That way, in some areas, it may be slightly less, given the circumstance. In some areas, it can certainly be more, but it has to be an average of 100 feet. I think that's something I would definitely support to the north and to the south. In my expert opinion, what I would say is where you look where Mr. Robertson's property is, where we're already going to talk about having that buffer there, where you're showing what is shown currently as where sanitary sewer lines are going to go, because that's sort of where, not along the road, but that makes that on the interior. Both of that's a creek. Both of those are creeks that run through there. The condition that we really need to make is not only to protect the homeowners, but to protect the homeowners is there should be a 50-foot buffer from the center line of that creek on either side, which their plan currently would accommodate. But again, without stating that in the record, we have no way of enforcing that. So if we're talking about buffering, I would say not only does it need to be on the exterior adjacent to the property owners, but it also be an opportunity to make that, ensure that those trees on those creeks are preserved. And a 50-foot buffer, 25 on either side of the center line of that creek, I think would be a huge step forward into making sure that the park that we're being presented today for this innovative park is the one that we actually see built.
Further, Alderman Little.
He hit what I was going to hit on.
Alderman Maynard.
Mr. Tomlinson, I know you have the property across the street. I see you here. Did you have any specific concern?
I have concerns with the egress, trailer trucks and things like that. Always. somebody in and they say, we wanna do this, or we're not gonna spend it, how tough are y'all gonna be in holding the line on community development? And, I think when Tupelo and the grandfather of development up there is, it's community development. You have community development, you get economic development, you have good schools, that sort of thing. But, I agree with, Dr. Dawkins, everybody wants to protect their property. That's the issue here. The issue up there is they want to do economic development. I understand that, I just hope that people will be mindful of all the people that are involved, because they're gonna lose some value if things are not done right. And they're getting paid to put somebody in there. I agree, I don't think the rendering plants in there, noise, there are always compromises when it comes to money and making difference.
Further comments from the members of the board? Any further comments from Alderman Little?
I just saw someone raising their hand up there.
Do you want to yield to Mr. Dawkins?
I will.
All right.
I'm
Mr.
gonna
Dawkins.
just very brief, and I hope it comes out very positive. I think we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish tonight, and that's to make us all aware that we want to protect the integrity of all of our development in Starkville. We've not always done that. You know, we've taken bulldozers and we've bulldozed down some. And we are very supportive of positive, planned economic development. And, we've got all the trust in the world, but you may not be here for all this is done. And I really appreciate your hearing, and I think the fact that all of us have heard what we said tonight is significantly getting us in the right direction. Thank you.
Any further comments from the members of the board? Any further comments? Any further comments? Seeing none, that will conclude this public hearing on the proposed rezoning of approximately 326 acres of property north of Highway 182 and east of Highway 25. The next matter that you have before you is a public hearing on the appeal of a recommendation of rezoning with conditions of approximately 6.05 acres of property located at North Jackson between Woodlawn and Bridle Path. Mr. Sanders, would you introduce?
Case RZ 14-05 was heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their October meeting. The request by the property owner is to rezone lots 32, 34, 37, and 39 along this area right here. The new Family Dollar is right here, Bridle Path and Woodlawn Road, just to give you an idea of where the location is in, along Jackson Street. It's currently zoned residential estate, and the request by the property owner is to rezone to C2, a general business. The Planning Commission is recommending approval with conditions, and those conditions being, if the property were to be rezoned C2, a buffer yard would be required per landscape ordinance, Section 8 buffer yard and screening of residential low impact and general commercial high impact uses. Any future commercial development would require any parking and security lighting to be recessed and shielded away from residential areas. Any entrances and exits will be restricted to Jackson Street or Highway 389. A 6-foot privacy fence shall be constructed along the western side of the property along the 30-foot buffer yard setback. Landscaping within the buffer yard shall consist of evergreen screening. Development will be restricted to 1 story, and also any speakers or amplification systems over 60 decibels shall be directed to the front of the property. An appeal was filed by the Plantation Homes Homeowners Association, and 20% of the property owners have signed a petition requiring a supermajority vote of approval if the rezoning is granted approval.
Are there any questions or comments from the members of the board for Mr. Sanders?
Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Sanders, you did receive the letter from the pastor of the church Ward 10. The letter sent by Reverend Dr. Charlie F. Barnes Sr. He's here tonight. And the letter indicates that if the board approves this zoning change, that there should be a condition in the zoning approval, if that happens, that prohibits the sale, serving, or dispensing of any beer, wine, whiskey, or any alcoholic beverage at any time. And then further, that if the property is ever to be subdivided or rezoned, then that shall be a covenant in the deed that runs with the land. You're aware of that, right?
Yes, sir. The Montpelier Baptist Church did submit a letter.
Okay.
It is part of the record. It is part of the packet that was part of that was submitted to the board members and to the city's website. And the church is not necessarily opposed to the rezoning. They are just asking for a restriction on the sale of alcohol to be possibly placed on any zoning approval.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further? Alderman Carver?
I guess, what is the character change in the neighborhood? And this is Ward 5, right? Like,
Yes, that's right. Yes, sir.
and say this is Alderman Main. I've been out of town with a death in the family, but I've kind of missed this. But is this something you support or don't support for various reasons? Or can you give us a little history?
Are you asking that as a question to
Twofold
Alderman
question,
Maynard?
I guess, to Mr. Sanders, is what is the change of character in the neighborhood, or what was the justification on this request?
The justification of request was a change in the use of the, to rezone property in the state of Mississippi, there's essentially a 2-step test. 1, there's an error in the zoning map, which there's not in this case. Or 2, the applicant has to prove change in conditions in the area. And the applicant...
Plus public need.
I'm sorry?
Plus public need.
Yes, public need. And the applicant stated various changes that has taken place, such as the Dollar General, which the building permits were pulled in 2013, the cottages at Creekside, which the first building permit was issued also in 2013. Kids Therapy Spot, which building permits were issued in 2014, and Florida Care, located at Jackson Street in Womack, which was issued, the first building permit was issued on 2012.
That's fine. That's sufficient. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Alderman Wynn.
I would like to say, Dr. Barnes, I noticed that you're here. Thank you so much for writing the board and expressing your concerns. And again, thank you so much.
Mayor, let me say, I guess I need to recognize my pastor here. So, Pastor, good to see you tonight. And we're going to get you recognized and let you be heard, Pastor. And we're going to get to that in just a few minutes. Glad to see you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board?
To answer your question, I have some reservations on these. I don't think this goes far enough in restricting. I've got some suggestions when it comes time, but I think we need to protect the citizens of this community. Historically, this area has been trampled on in a sense from a zoning perspective. If you look at Hospital Road, they've had lighting issues with the hospital expansion that had to be addressed. It took 8 years, I guess, to get addressed. There's been stormwater issues that have just flooded that neighborhood from development on Hospital Road, and a lot of that was prior to the stormwater ordinance and other building codes. There's a private road on Hospital Road that's not up to city code that dumps water all down through that neighborhood. So if we're moving forward with this, then we need to ensure those property owners that they're protected.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Are there any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, the process for comments from the parties in this case will be exactly the same as the previous process. Applicant, you will have a maximum of 15 minutes, and appellants, you may either designate a spokesperson or a couple of spokespersons, or I can keep a running clock. Applicant.
Can we split ours, 12 minutes and 3 minutes?
You'd like to reserve rebuttal? Yes. The applicant can have rebuttal because appellants, you will have the benefit of hearing the applicant's argument and you'll be able to respond. So his 3 minutes will give him the opportunity to respond after he's heard your argument. Applicant, you'll have 12 minutes.
Get a swig of water before I start here.
Mr. Sanders, while Mr. Moore wets his whistle, I forgot to ask you, was this hearing properly noted 15 days out?
Notice was placed in the Starkville Daily on November the 10th, and a letter was mailed on November the 7th.
Mr. Moore?
My name is John Moore. I'm an attorney for the applicants Jenny Garrett Sherman and Glenda Garrett Massey, the owners of the property, which are lots 32, 34, 37, and 39 Plantation, as shown on the Plantation Home Subdivision 1 plat. Even though these lots are not included within the restrictive covenants of that subdivision. Our clients are requesting the rezoning of the subject property based on changed or changing conditions in the existing area and, as the code says, or in the planning area generally, and the increasing need for commercial sites that make the change in the ordinance necessary and desirable in accordance with public need for orderly and harmonious growth. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved our request on October 14th, 2014 with conditions. Condition 2A, a buffer yard would be required per landscape ordinance section 8, buffer yard and screening of residential and general commercial high impact uses. Any future commercial development would require any parking and security lighting to be recessed and shielded away from residential areas. Additionally, conditions were imposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, as has just been shown on the wall there. The property will have entrances from Highway 389 only and not the neighborhood streets. A 6-foot privacy fence will be constructed along the west side of the property. A line of evergreen trees shall be planted in buffer areas for screening. They also recommended all structures be limited to 1 story. Any amplifications over 60 decibels should be kept towards the front of the subject buildings. All of these designed to give some level of comfort and protection to the neighborhood. Also, we were also in receipt of that letter from Reverend Charlie Barnes, pastor of Mount Pilliard Church, requesting a condition that no alcohol be stored, sold, served on the premises. We have no objection with that whatsoever. As an accommodation to them and out of respect for the church, we don't think that's the best use of the property anyway, so we don't have any problems with that being a condition. We don't have any problems with that being inserted in any deed that we prepare for the transfer of the property when we sell it, because that's our goal is to sell it and not develop it. There is one condition that I would like to discuss that I think is maybe a little redundant, but it limits structures to 1 story. There's really no definition of 1 story in our code. All our limitations in construction are based on height. In an RE zoning category, the maximum height of a structure is 45 feet. We're asking for a C2. The maximum height allowance in a C2 is 45 feet, so they're equal. So with that being the case, there's really no reason to limit the number of floors or stories because we already have the same height restrictions already in the ordinance. And by trying to define it in stories may just add some level of confusion at some point in the future. Also, we have to show change of conditions since the initial application, which was done in 2009. One of the best ways to show a change of condition is money. How much money has been spent in that area since that time? Because when you start spending money, things are changing. And as an example, I've got a list of the items that have occurred since 2009. The Dollar General was built directly across the street from one of our lots. You could actually look from our lot into the front door of the Dollar General. That's approximately a $500,000 project. East Garrett Road extension was done at a cost of approximately $1 million. The resurfacing of Highway 182 was $2 million. The current development at Cottages at Creekside, patio-type homes, PUD development, is in excess of $2 million. The Florida Care facility moved from 389 to the corner of Womack and Montgomery Street at approximate cost of $1.5 million. No sooner than they moved out of their facility on 389, the kids therapy spot moved immediately into that. Also, the women's clinic was built since that time, which was approximately $1 million, and in excess of $25 million has been spent through the hospital. So in that general area, in that neighborhood, there's been, since 2009, approximately $33.2 million spent in that area, which is a real indication of change. I lived in that neighborhood from 1968, when my family moved there, until I graduated from college after that. There's been more money spent since 2009 in that area than was spent up until that time, completely. That's how much things have changed in that area. Not only that, there's been an additional change just since we filed our application. The city has just recently spent a little over $40,000 resurfacing Garrett Road from North Montgomery to 389, which is an additional change. The Mississippi Department of Transportation will be the entity that will determine how many entrances can come off the property owned to Highway 389, because this is a MDOT controlled road, not a city controlled road. We're not asking for any entrances off Woodlawn or the other, I think, Bridle Path, the other street. Also, to point out to you, there's a lot 40 that our clients additionally own that's zoned RE that does have restrictive covenants on it. It's the very first lot on Woodlawn Drive, north of Woodlawn, that it's still gonna be RE. So its character is not gonna change. Now, just to give you an indication of what the city's opinion about how things have changed in the area over the last several years, I'm gonna quote from some minutes of some meetings I think would be imperative to this, even though these may be things that will come to recollection. In 2009, Greater Partnership President John Maynard said regarding that area is tied to the transportation network and it's the logical vision of growth up north Jackson, which is 389, and through to 82. Robbie Koblantz, who redid some commercial offices in that area and also had a piece of property rezoned from R5 to C2, commented in the paper that there's a redevelopment spirit in Starkville Ward 5. Well, he's correct. There's a lot of changes. He's got a lot of tenants. Berry Electric is over there. Howell Heating and Cooling. There's been a significant number of changes in the commercial activity in that area. Also, what we're asking to do is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which is very important. The subject property is located along a major thoroughfare with direct connection to a limited access high-speed highway in close proximity to other commercial uses. There's a laundromat, there's a car wash, mini storage, and then the Copeland's properties, and a brand new Dollar General. In 2009, the Planning and Zoning Commission commented when this property was attempted to be rezoned at the time. The chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission commented, "This property is not suitable for single-family houses." It's not suitable. And the reason it's not suitable is people do not want to have their primary driveways coming off onto a major thoroughfare.
a state highway. So it's gonna take a commercial entity in order to, have a viable use of this property. The other thing is, there were comments made about, the need for additional commercial areas. If you will look at the city's 2005 comprehensive plan, it states in there that there is a serious need for more commercial property to support our medical needs for the hospital. And this is the closest place, it's less than a half a mile from that property, so there's definitely need. Also, by developing this property into what we hope to be doctor's offices, that's our primary goal, but we're not taking anything out of the C2 category off the table, if it's accepted. It's gonna add jobs, it's gonna add property to the tax roll, it's gonna support our hospital, it's gonna provide doctors an opportunity to purchase lots to put a clinic instead of either renting from the hospital or picking from very few lots that are left on Hospital Road at the present time. Now, a couple of comments that come straight from the comprehensive plan that I think are important for the board to hear. Inside that comprehensive plan, it says, the city struggles to develop a budget each year as an operating with one of the lowest millage rates in the state, which you are. It needs to develop new sources of revenue, capitalize on existing resources. This property is an existing resource with all the infrastructure ready to develop. We've got plenty of commercial property in other areas that don't have municipal sewer and water, and that we don't have the money to get to it. We need to be using these infill spots that already have these infrastructures in place, so the city doesn't have to spend money to try to make money. This property is ready to go and would be a good source of revenue. We anticipate if we have 4 doctors' clinics, you're looking at least $500,000 to $600,000 per clinic, which will add to the tax roll, create construction jobs, and be a nice addition to that area. It will actually be, with the cost of construction as it is now, anything new in that area is gonna look better than what's across the street. I mean, let's just face it, that's just a fact. And it says also in our comprehensive plan, commercial activities should be encouraged to form in concentrated areas along the major thoroughfare network. Well, Highway 389 is declared under our code as a major thoroughfare. So that's where it says these type of things should be. Also, it states in there, the commercial land uses should be located at or near strategic intersections on the transportation network with limited curb cuts to the existing roadways. So we're gonna stay off Prospect Path and Woodlawn. The reservation, it also says in here, and I think this is really unique to this situation, the reservation of strategic sites within or adjacent to residential neighborhoods for neighborhood or community commercial uses should be encouraged, which this property qualifies as that. It also states that community, C2 is called community commercial. In C2, it says that one of the things that you get is a variety store, which is a Dollar General, which is another indication that our property right across the street from it is compatible with what's going on there. Now, I'm gonna real quickly state that in our comprehensive plan, it mentions major streets, thoroughfares, collector streets, and there's 7 major thoroughfares. We're less than 2 miles from 5 of them, and we are one of them. And we are also within 2/10 of a mile.
Mr. Moore, your time's expired.
Okay, 2/10 of a mile from Major Street and 2
Mr.
streets
Moore.
within a mile.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we will hear from the appellants, and it looks like the appellants are represented as well. Mr. McAlpin, how much time will you be taking?
I will be relatively brief, and there are homeowners here that will also want to.
So do you want to specify time, or do you want us to just take what you take?
Just keep time on me.
Okay.
My name is Dalton McAlpin, and I represent the Plantation Homes Homeowners Association. This subdivision is a pretty old subdivision for Starkville. It was platted in 1959, the first part of Plantation Homes, which includes the part that's sought to be rezoned. So it's been there for about 55 years. And there are residents in the subdivision that have been here a long time. I moved here 40 years ago, and there's some residents in plantation homes that have lived there longer than that. So, of course, this matter is of great interest. For all the years for all these 25 years, this property has been pretty much as you see it now, with the exception of some horses, which Mr. Moore provided to me that he and others perhaps rode when Mr. Garrett wasn't looking. But between horses and pasturage, that's all that any of us have ever seen of this property. On one prior occasion, the property rezoning was attempted and it was denied. And on this application to rezone it to C2, you can imagine the dismay of some of the residents, and especially the old residents, when they looked at the permitted uses in C2, which include warehousing, automobile repair, indoor recreation, eating and drinking facilities, bars. I mean, they were very upset. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission heard from a lot of them, and as you can imagine, they have a keen interest in what backs up to them. This rezoning is not going to be nearby. It backs up to plantation homes. It's adjacent to. It's immediately next to. People who have lived there for a long time were concerned about traffic, especially people coming in and out of a commercial development. They're worried about noise. They're worried about other nuisances. They're worried about bright lights associated with commercial development. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission heard all of this, and they put these conditions that you saw, and it's in Mr. Sanders' cover memorandum too, as part of the rezoning. If it's rezoned, it will be subject to these conditions. And for the record, the homeowners association certainly have no objection to including a provision that prohibits alcohol on the property. So apparently we're all at least in agreement on that. When two dissimilar kinds of zoning butt up against each other, the chance that the higher use, which in this case is the homeowners, the chance that they will be damaged is higher than when it's like, within 500 feet or something. These people are right up against it. The homeowners association believes that if you're going to rezone the property to C2, that these conditions are at a minimum what you should require as part of the rezoning, which you add these conditions, which you can do. The one serious disagreement that they have with Mr. Moore at the moment is the one-story provision. They would like to see that retained. And as he pointed out, the height requirement, maximum height in a C2 zone is 45 feet. So think of nearly 4 stories as we think about stories. So you can see why the homeowners would be really upset with the idea that there can be a multi-story structure there. I hope that if the property is rezoned with these conditions, that a doctor office or something like that opens there. I think that would be very good. But you have to keep in mind that there are lots of uses in C2 that are not just professional offices. So it is the homeowners association's position that if you're going to rezone to C2, that at a minimum, you ought to include these restrictions or conditions, as well as one that prohibits alcohol. Now, there are other homeowners here, or the homeowners in the neighborhood who are here and who may wish to speak, so I'll stand aside.
All right, you will have collectively 7.5 minutes remaining, and I've just been informed Pastor Barnes has a class that he has to teach, so I'm going to recognize Pastor Barnes first. Pastor Barnes, you'll be speaking against the 7.5 minutes that remain for the opponents. Yeah, it won't start until he starts speaking.
Good evening, Mayor Wiseman, to the board and to all of the homeowners. We're here out of concern for what could possibly be placed within the area just below our church at the C2. Understanding that C2 is very wide, and cannot really just know or determine what's going to be placed there. And so we are concerned that what we have proposed to the board, that it would be considered and that it would be upheld. Certainly we are concerned for the community and for the value as well as for the landscape. And we are deeply concerned about what could come into the area. And so that's our major concern as a church, our major concern as individuals, our major concern as a household of faith. And we certainly thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Barnes.
Thanks. We appreciate that. Board of Alderman, I would like for you, first of all, to recognize, and let me recognize members of Plantation Homes who have been sitting here for 2 hours waiting for a chance to hear all of this. Plantation Homes people, come on, wave your hands. Stand up. Stand up. We want to know you're here. These are your voters. Thank you. I would, after recognizing my fellow neighbors, like to make a couple of brief comments, and I know other people will also follow up with other comments. We have great concerns because C2, has already been stated, is a really broad and general. And because a doctor's office would be nice, and we agree, there is no guarantee that that's what's going to go there once it's been rezoned C2. Big concern I have is traffic on Highway 389/Jackson Street. This is exactly the place where Jackson Street narrows to 2 lanes. We have traffic congestion in this very spot already. There's been 1 person killed at the intersection of Jackson Street and Bridle Path. There was just a couple months ago another accident at where the goes down to 2 lanes. So we've got traffic congestion. I seldom use Womack to turn onto Jackson Street because I have trouble getting across traffic now. You put a commercial development immediately across from that with traffic coming and coming and coming, and you have no say, I don't think, on traffic lights, but the city better very well be prepared to handle some significant traffic problems for whatever commercial development may possibly go in there if you decide to rezone this. Let me also be quite clear that this is not adjacent to or next to, this is our neighborhood.
Excuse me, for the record, what's your name?
I'm sorry, I'm Charlotte Fuquay.
Thank you, Ms. Fuquay. All right. And actually, my time was off a second ago. The clerk has informed me I was 2 minutes off. I think I was actually looking at the time of the evening that it is, and it was 7:25. So you now have 6 minutes and 29 seconds remaining collectively.
For the record, I might say Charlotte Fuquay is the current homeowners president of Plantation Homes. I'm the immediate past president. I'm Helen Sue Parrish, and I was on board when we came before the planning and zoning in 2009. I ask you prayerfully to consider the exceptions that our Plantation Homes Homeowners Association has requested to keep the integrity of our neighborhood. Also, I'd like to point out that Mr. Moore's mother lives in Plantation Homes and Mr. Sherman's mother-in-law lives in Plantation Homes, and I'm sure they do not want to do anything that's going to devalue their property. I want you to consider what it would be like if this was your property, what was going in your backyard or your front yard, so that when you make the vote, you decide what could you live with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parrish. All right. There is 5.5 minutes remaining.
That'll do it.
I'm Pink Studley.
brief speaker. I'd like to say that I think this issue is bigger than plantation homes. I think this is a city issue. We're talking about quality of life. We're talking about trust and expectation. I'm one of those early homeowners. And when we bought the lot, nobody said, oh, and by the way, will you mind if there's a fast food restaurant behind you or next door or wherever? Now, when those lots were purchased on North Jackson Street, there was already a buffer zone. It was North Jackson. They knew that. They expected traffic to be there. But they didn't expect to be told that they were gonna change from a home site of 1 acre where they have invested their money, they have raised their families, they have had a neighborhood. Now, that's not dollars and cents, but it is citywide. And your Planning and Zoning Commission, I know, is wanting to have real buffer zones, not collisions of two zones. So I ask you to think ahead. Think ahead to quality of life. We're wanting a city where retirement people come, where sports enthusiasts come and have a second home. And what are they looking for? All the stores that were mentioned along there, they're not next to these lots. There are a few of them. Garrett's has been there. It's an institution. It's our private mascot. But that's the only commercialism that's there. So please think about that. And I know you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dudley. There are 3 minutes and 46 seconds remaining.
My name is Chuck Moore, and I'll be very brief. Very quickly, the RE zoning does not require houses only. It's broader than that. There are other conditional uses that are allowed in it. And also, our options are not residential or commercial. There are many other options in between, and I hope we would consider those. I would like to vote against C2 and start this process over with other types of zoning, because there are many other options in the code. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. 3 minutes and 13 seconds.
My name is Mary Grace Moore. Proud class of 71, Starkville High School. Returned 25 years later to the neighborhood where I grew up, which is Plantation Combs, where I own my own home. I think let's look at this issue from 30,000 feet. We have, let's face it, in Starkville and on North Jackson Street, a surplus of already appropriately zoned commercial property for sale and to be developed. We do not need, at this time in our history, more commercial property zoning. That's not what we need as a city. So, knowing that from a city planning and a quality of life standpoint, this is not a desirable move to put new C2 zoning right smack dab up against residential estate zoning. I can, as a business person myself, I cannot see a justification, even from a revenue generating perspective. Let's face it, the revenue generation, would it be net plus additions to the city coffers, when new C2 zoning would be likely to cannibalize already existing commercial property for sale, starting at Martin Luther King Drive, driving north to Hospital Road, both sides of the street, commercial property for sale, and then on up to the bypass. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. 1 minute and 42 seconds remaining.
I'll probably take 30 seconds only. My name is Julia Williamson. I would just like to suggest, it sounds to me from what I've heard so far and what I know we feel within the community is that C2 is just simply not a possibility, not something we want to accept at all. But the common ground that I hear is something of a planned unit development. I'm hearing medical from both sides. And I think something like that, if there could be planned unit development or something very clear, that let's make it specific medical, we'd be on the same line and we wouldn't be having such a conflict, and it could be a win-win situation. So I'm with Chuck Moore to say, let's start over and let's talk planned unit development and see where we get. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. 48 seconds.
I'm David Lang, and appreciate being here tonight. Just like to reiterate that we'd like to oppose the C2 zoning. There is no plan for development. This is just to make the land more valuable to sell, and there is no plan for C2. And we cannot accept C2 as an unrestricted business zoning in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. 28 seconds left if somebody wants it.
John Fuquay. I would just like to challenge something the attorney over here said, that this is not suitable for houses. I've walked that land, and they're very nice housing lots. All it would require is a little screening along Jackson Street and some drives, some existing drives within the neighborhood. It certainly should not be rejected as a place to build a house.
Thank you, Mr. Fuquay. 8 seconds if somebody can do it. All right, that will conclude the appellate's responses. Mr. Moore, you have reserved 3 minutes for rebuttal. And Mr. Moore, do please limit your comments to responding to what you've heard.
Couple of comments. For one thing, I don't want the board to feel like we're unsympathetic to the people in the neighborhood, because we did sit down with Alderman Calvin and a couple of members of that subdivision and discussed this. And we were proactive in making discussions with them and communications with them. We did not file this and ignore it. Also, for your information, the lot that's directly behind Garrett's store is actually owned by Jenny Garrett's mother, Grace. And with Grace's death, that house is gonna go to Jenny's sister, who was be a resident there. So they're ever mindful about what's gonna happen to the property, because their sister lives there. And me personally, since someone else brought it up, my mother lives in that neighborhood. And I am not concerned about what's gonna happen on that property, nor is she concerned. If you go in Woodlawn Drive, there's a funny little turnoff to the right that's Cherry Lane, and there's a little triangular portion. And depending on how you count the lots, my mother's house is either the third or fourth house, depending on if you count Porky Bean's house on Cherry Lane. But anyway, I am not concerned for her welfare, what's gonna happen there, because I have confidence in George Sherman and his family. His mother-in-law is gonna be living there as well. George has developed his development on Russell Street, and has always been a fine, outstanding corporate citizen. He also owns Zaxby's. So I am not concerned whatsoever about what's going to occur there, because I have confidence in these people, and with these conditions, it will be a very nice asset to the city. Also, Mississippi Department of Transportation will be in charge of determining the access points. Now, I'd also, I'm gonna go back to quoting Dora Herring. That property is not suitable for single-family residence. She's at the time was chair of the Plan and Zoning Commission. I have to concur with her with that. It's not a place where you're gonna have your driveway going in and out. Well, with limited number of access points as determined by MDOT, it would make a good commercial access. So in conclusion, I would just like to say, we proved the conditions that are required for this property to be rezoned. We proved that there's a necessity, because it's, as in the 2005 City Comprehensive Plan, it says we need more.
Mr. Moore, your time's expired.
For medical uses. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the comments by the parties. Are there any questions or comments from the members of the board? Are there any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, That will conclude the public hearing on the recommendation of rezoning with conditions of approximately 6.05 acres of property located on North Jackson between Woodlawn and Bridle Path. The next matter that you have before you is the consideration of approving the travel for
Did we put those before A?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I had the rezoning matters after the travel, but I was not here when that happened, so y'all
That's
correct
fine.
me if
B and C.
It was B and C.
All right.
You're right.
So you have the request for approval of,
Move approval.
motion has been made by Alderman Vaughn to approve of the travel for Mayor Parker Wiseman to attend the Fiber to the Home Council, America's premier members meeting and board elections in Raleigh, North Carolina, December 9th through 10th, 2014, with advanced travel requested in an amount not to exceed $900 as presented. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Vaughn, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion, any discussion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter that you have,
Sitting out there.
the next matter that you have before you is the recommendation for rezoning with conditions of approximately 326 acres of property north of Highway 182 and east of Highway 25. Remember, this matter and the next matter will both require supermajority votes. There are not 7 of you here right now.
He went to the bathroom, he
That's
said.
what-
He wants to
Okay,
come in.
provided Alderman Walker returns in time for the vote, that means it will require 5 of the 7 of you to vote affirmatively for the rezoning to pass. Mr. Attorney, do you have anything to add to that?
I do not, that's correct.
Okay. Discussion.
Mayor, may we recognize?
You may.
Mayor, I want to go on record and say I agree with the gentleman from 1, 3, and 5, that this is the proper time to put some reasonable conditions in tonight as to the buffer. So I'm in favor of supporting whatever reasonable conditions that we need to put there just to give buffers in line with what we have discussed tonight. So hopefully there'll be a motion with that and any other necessary condition with regard to this matter.
Alderman Carver.
I'd like to make, well, I'll yield the floor first if Alderman Maynard's got something he wants to say.
Alderman Maynard.
I was gonna make the motion as well.
Go ahead.
But I was gonna talk long enough for Alderman Walker to hopefully get back.
Y'all just can't all yield.
Mr. Sanders, can you please bring that screenshot back up, or Joey, you can just hold up. Joey, along that northern border, what lot numbers are those? So it starts with 1?
The residential area is immediately north of Lot 3. This is a sewer business here.
Right.
And this is 7 lot with some.
So I would make the motion that we approve with the conditions of a 100-foot buffer on the northern border to the east end of Lot 3 and the eastern border along, is that Lot 15? And in addition to that, a 50-foot buffer on either side of the creek running through the property. And I yield to 4.
I'm sorry, I missed that, I apologize.
I was just discussing the fact that adding the conditions of a 100-foot buffer on the northern property to the eastern point of Lot 3, the eastern part of Lot 15, and a 50-foot buffer on either side of the creek running through. Does it run through the entire perimeter?
I would say the creek that runs from, if I might, the creek that runs from south to north through the property. Essentially, what is that, Lot 16 through, up through Lot 5, in between 5 and 3 is where it exits.
We interject one thing, the way of course, we don't know what the final road layout will look like precisely, but we know we're gonna have to cross that creek in at least one instance here.
Yes.
And possibly here, I just wanna be sure that condition doesn't limit our ability to putting culverts or bridges over the creek. We are subject to the Corps of Engineers,
Right. I would say, and my view on that, Alderman, from 3 would be that no, it would not.
Want to make that a little clearer as it relates to built structures?
Yes. If it's limited to built structure, that does not make a problem.
All right, so what I've got is
Limited to infrastructure and built structures, would that be?
now you don't want it to limit infrastructure and built structures.
No.
You want to prohibit built structures but allow infrastructure.
Correct.
All right, so the motion that I've got is a motion to approve the recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the rezoning of approximately 326 acres of property north of Highway 182 and east of Highway 25 to M1 with all conditions as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the following additional conditions added.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized for a point of clarity?
You may.
Mr. Sanders, condition number 2, the Planning and Zoning Commission attached, that says all developable sites would need to comply with the current zoning requirements. What does that mean?
It's not really a condition, it's more so a statement. Any development in the city of Starkville would have to comply with our zoning ordinance.
So does that condition, in your opinion, need to be attached?
Yes, sir.
All right, Alderman Maynard, would you like to strike that condition?
Yes.
What condition number is
2.
that?
2.
All right, so the motion would stand as a motion to approve a recommendation of rezoning approximately 326 acres of property north of Highway 182 and east of Highway 25 to M1 with all conditions recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission with the exception of condition number 2 and adding the following conditions.
We need to tweak it, because when we accept all of the conditions, we're accepting that Section 8 40-foot buffer requirement. So we need to strike all the P and Z conditions and just go with Alderman Maynard's condition.
Alderman Maynard, are you okay with that? All right. So the motion would stand at a motion to approve a recommendation of rezoning approximately 326 acres of property north of Highway 182 and the east of Highway 25 to M1 with the following conditions. That there be a 100-foot buffer at the end of, that there be a 100-foot buffer to the east end of Lot 3.
Northern side of the northern boundary.
The northern boundary of
All
Lot
right, that
3.
there be a 100-foot buffer along the northern boundary of Lot 3. That there be a 100-foot buffer along the eastern border of Lot 15. That there be a,
Actually 16.
all right,
It would be a 100-foot buffer along the, I guess, western boundary of Lot 16.
western border of Lot 16. And that there be a 50-foot buffer on each side of the creek that runs from south to north, and that buffer shall extend to built structures only and shall not place any limitations on the building of infrastructure. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Discussion. Alderman Walker.
I would like to offer a friendly amendment, if I might. I would say I'd like to offer that the buffer to the north on Lot 3 if you would consider saying that being 100-foot minimum average, the buffer should be a minimum of 100 feet on average. Because there may be a place or two along that where, you know, it could be potentially pinched. But I would say I like the idea of an average. Gives a little bit more flexibility, and I like the term minimum. To encourage Mr. Deason and the folks at the link that if we can get more than 100 feet, then we certainly would like to be able to do that. Regarding the how we stated along the creek, perhaps we, can you read that piece one more time?
A 50-foot buffer on each side of the creek that runs from south to north, and the buffer shall extend to built structures only and shall not apply to infrastructure.
The only thing I would say is instead of saying the built language, I would say excluding infrastructure, excluding the infrastructure and street crossings, road vehicular crossing.
All right, so let's take those one at a time. The first proposed amendment by Alderman Walker and Alderman Maynard, I'll ask if you accept this as friendly, is to change the language in your first condition, which applies a 100-foot buffer to the eastern border of Lot 3, to make that a buffer of an average of 100 feet along the eastern border of Lot 3.
Northern.
Oh, northern border of Lot 3. All right. Alderman Maynard, so that would be changing the buffer of 100 feet along the northern border of Lot 3 to a buffer of an average of 100 feet along the northern border of Lot 3. Alderman Maynard, do you accept that as friendly?
Yes, I do.
Without objection. Seeing no objection from the board, the main motion has been so amended so that condition 1 will now be a buffer of an average of 100 feet along the northern border of Lot 3. Alderman Walker, what was your second amendment?
Second amendment would be maintain a 50-foot buffer on either side of the creek that runs south to north, excluding sanitary sewer infrastructure and road crossings that cross the creek.
Okay. So rather than talking about what is included and what is excluded, that would revise the motion, or revise the condition, which is condition 3, to be a 50-foot buffer on each side of the creek that runs south to north, excluding, give me your language.
Excluding sanitary sewer location and or vehicular travel that has to cross the creek.
Excluding all sanitary sewer locations and vehicular travel that has to cross the creek.
Yes.
Alderman Maynard, do you accept that as friendly?
Yes, I do.
Without objection. Is there any objection by the members of the board? Seeing none, condition 3 has been so amended. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Maynard's motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? It is unanimous. By a vote of 7 in favor with 0 against, the motion passes. The next matter you have before you is the recommendation of approval of rezoning with conditions of approximately 6.05 acres of property located at North Jackson Street between Woodlawn and Bridle Path. Discussion. Alderman Maynard.
Yes, sir. Buddy, can you bring that plat back up again? So you curved in the Joel. as I mentioned before, the homeowners in Plantation Homes in this neighborhood have suffered because of commercial development before, especially along Hospital Road. Whether it be light pollution or excessive stormwater runoff that sits in backyards. So I'm particularly sensitive to any changes that we're trying to make in their areas. I do agree with Mr. Moore, and I do agree with Dora Herring that I don't think any residential development would ever go there. One, because of the restrictions that the highway department would put on egress and regress on 389, and two, because that road is just too busy. But I do want to make sure that if we approve their request, that we protect the homeowners as best we can. And I want to make sure that any buffer that's put there contains the entire area and not just what may be defined as the western border. So when that comes up, I want to take a look at that. So, Buddy, are you defining the western border as that red line along the western border?
This would be the western line of the rezone.
Okay. And then the final lot is on that corner of Jackson and Woodlawn.
That is not part of the rezoning request.
That is owned though by the Shermans. Is that correct, Mr. Ward?
That is correct.
Put your light back on again, Mr. Sanders. Okay.
So the requested fence would go from the end of Mr. Nash's property right there on that corner all the way up there. Yeah. Planning and zoning requested a 6-foot fence be constructed along the western side of the property and that a 30-foot buffer yard be served as a setback. I would like to make that at least a 7-foot fence. I think people can see over a 6-foot fence. That's not high enough in my opinion. I think we need to make that higher. I also agree with the preacher in saying that I would like to see us restrict the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages not to be sold on that property at any time. I think that will eliminate potential bars, liquor stores, and a lot of the noise that could take place with development there. And then the other items requested by P&Z, I think, are all worthy of consideration as well going forward. The good news about that piece of property is along that western border. But if you can point out the houses along that area, the one on the bottom is the closest house. You can see here the other houses coming down this street are here, 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 and then this is the Garrett's house. Is that correct, Mr. Moore?
It's on the opposite side of Robert Mann.
Oh, okay, over here. So here's the property line. This is the Nash house. This one and this one are the closest to. But these others have pretty significant link between their home and the area. Also, the topography of that area is such that the hill goes up, so there's, again, an additional buffer there to those back houses that I think with the addition of a 7-foot fence along there provide bufferage to the neighbors. In addition to the fence, the planning and zoning also said there will be a 30-foot buffer yard setback with landscaping that will include evergreen screening all along the buffer. I'll open it up for other comments before I.
Discussion. Alderman Walker.
This is a tough one. And I say it's tough for a number of reasons. I think there are clear concerns from the community. I think those are justified. I also agree that having this zone residential estate is probably not appropriate either. I think had this been presented as seeking a change to C1, I think the decision would be much easier from my perspective than C2. C2 certainly has many more potential uses than C1, and I think that's justified that the neighborhood has some concern there. I think one condition that has been talked about that I would like to offer just a slightly different perspective on is the height issue. I think I agree that we don't have anything, Mr. Sanders, is it correct, in our ordinance that doesn't really specify one story. It just lists height. The only thing that I know is different is the T district, which it says 6 stories. It does list stories in there, is that correct?
It does list stories.
Okay, so that lists stories. So one thing that I would say from a noise perspective, from a noise perspective, I would actually, if this was adjacent to my house, what I would encourage was something slightly taller than 1 story if I could do it. And the reason for that being is hopefully they can be able to put all of their equipment, HVAC, those kind of things on the top of the roof, and that sound's going to go up instead of out. So I would encourage that whether we keep 1 story or not, that we consider giving a height to say a maximum of 20 or 25 feet to give you some flexibility there, because from a noise perspective, I think that's going to be more beneficial to the neighborhood than something that's at grade. Again, I think from a buffer standpoint, a minimum of 30-foot buffer I think is sufficient in lieu of to go along with the change in elevation there. I think that would be appropriate. I think noise is a legitimate concern, and I think the condition to address the height of that will help. I think the condition from light that has already been approved on here will help. I think the biggest limitation is the access to the width of the road, and I think that MDOT's going to control that. So I think from a traffic standpoint, that's going to satisfy the neighborhood. Again, the concern is the number of uses that C2 can bring. Again, if it was C1, I think this decision is much easier. I agree. I can agree with the neighborhood and the pastor for this being no alcohol on the site, and normally I wouldn't agree to that. That would be something that I might not agree with, but that's a concession that everybody here seems to agree with, so I can support that. But this is a difficult decision. The only other comment I would make from a construction standpoint, if we're talking about requiring a 7-foot fence, I would make it 8, just from ease of lumber and sticking with nominal sizes and those kind of things, and that'll give you just a little bit more of a buffer as well. So this is a tough choice. There's positives for this. Everybody likes to quote the comprehensive plan for both for or against, and you can make your argument either way. But infill development on a major thoroughfare in Starkville is something that is good. The question about will this cannibalize more commercial development certainly has that opportunity to be able to do that. And again, if this were approached as C1, I think it makes that decision much easier. So a lot of legitimate concerns on both sides. But when it comes right down to it, we have a piece of property that is not going to be maximizing its use Currently, infill development on a major thoroughfare is appropriate. I think we do need to make sure that we have as many conditions in place as possible to help alleviate concerns of the neighborhood. I think maintaining that property as RE that's on Woodlawn Road, that first lot, is imperative. It's absolutely imperative to make this project palatable. With that, I yield the floor.
Further discussion?
I have just one question I would like to ask of Attorney Moore. Attorney Moore, I heard you mention that you didn't have any concerns, but I understand that your mother resides here. Does she have any concerns?
No, she does not.
Okay, thank you, I yield.
Further discussion? We have no motion pending. Alderman Maynard.
I move approval to rezone the 6.05 plus or minus acres property located on North Jackson Street between Woodlawn and Bridle Path from RE zone to C2 zone with the following conditions. 1, that a buffer yard be required per landscape ordinance section 8, buffer yard and screening of residential low impact and general commercial high impact uses. 2, that any future commercial development shall require any parking and security lighting to be recessed and shielded away from all residential areas. 3, that any entrances and exits shall be restricted to Jackson Street, or that an 8-foot privacy fence shall be constructed along the western side of the property and a 30-foot buffer setback be provided. 5, that landscaping within the buffer yard shall consist of evergreen screening. 6, that development shall be restricted to existing code. I'm trying to.
I don't think that would get you there.
What would your recommendation be?
I would just give a height. I would say, I think 45 feet is maybe not what you're looking for there, but I think if you said 30 feet, and if that turned out to be somebody that wanted to do a 1-story building, they could. If they wanted to do a 2-story building, they could probably do that too, but I would give a height.
Development shall be restricted to no greater than 30 feet in height. Any speakers or amplification systems over 60 decibels shall be directed to the front of the property. And beer, wine, whiskey, or any other alcoholic beverages shall not be sold, served, or dispensed in any manner on the rezoned property at any time. If the property is ever sold or subdivided, there shall be a restrictive covenant included that shall run with the land, which prohibits the sale or service of beer, wine, whiskey, or any other alcoholic beverage on the subdivided or sold property at any time.
Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
I have a question for Alderman Walker.
This is a question for Community Development Director Sanders or Mr. Havlin, who might be able to answer this question. Currently, REC2, all that gives a 45-foot height, whatever height. How is that height measured on that building? Is that to top of beginning of roof? Is that to top of roof? How is that? How do we measure that?
It's the very tip of the roof. So if you had a roof like in a traditional triangle, it would be to the very tip.
New construction, now, these steep roofs, you could hit that
35,
pretty easily
maybe.
with a 1-story.
Better.
But the ordinance does say it's maximum height of 45 feet, and we measure it from the very tip of the roof down to the
So
grade.
Just change it to code.
I would think if you refer to the other way to do that would be, you just refer to the C2, what is allowed in C2, which is 45, which is the same as RE. That could do.
And in many ways, if you're going with the 45-foot height, that doesn't need to be a condition because the code controls that
says that.
anyway. So that's an option.
It's already restricted to that. Is that what you're saying?
45 feet is the maximum height for any structure in a C2 zone.
And just delete that.
All right, so Alderman Maynard's motion would stand as read with the height condition deleted. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes.
All right, and I see that you have reduced it to writing. Could you pass a copy to the clerk?
As soon as I edit it, yes.
Which one are you deleting?
6. On this one, the others, the 6-foot changed to 8-foot fence, and we deleted number 6, and we added the alcohol provision.
Since it has been reduced to writing without objection, I will not ask for it to be reread. Is there any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, do I hear a second?
Second?
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Discussion. Any discussion?
May I recognize?
You may.
Make sure I'm clear on the height. So the maximum height is 45 feet.
Maximum height allowed by all ordinance for a C2 zone is 45 feet.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Maynard's motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, by a vote of 7 in favor with 0 against, this motion passes. Without objection, I'm going to move us into a brief recess. Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, take a brief recess.
All right.
Wow.
Meeting will now come back to order. Next matter you have before you is discussion and consideration of potential changes to the animal control ordinance. Discussion.
May I be recognized?
You may.
I move that, in light of the earlier discussion and the points that were made, I have learned there are 2 thoughts on this issue. Prevailing thought from the majority of people that I talk with is that they see it, animals within the cemetery, whether they're cleaned up after or not cleaned up after, as a nuisance. And they just feel that's desecrating, allowing your animal to defecate on a grave, even if you're gonna clean it up, is desecration of property, and I don't think we need to do that. So with that, I would make a motion that we modify that the ordinance to add item H, that no domesticated animal shall be allowed on the property of any cemetery owned or maintained by the city of Starkville, excluding service animals.
All right, the motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to approve of the changes to the animal control ordinance as recommended by the Cemetery Association and as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
With the addition of excluding service
Oh,
animals.
you added
Yes,
that to
I
what was
added that,
presented?
yes.
All right.
I'm sorry.
All right, so the motion is to approve the recommended changes to the animal control ordinance as presented, also adding to the proposed changes a new subsection H in section 5 that reads as follows: no domesticated animal shall be allowed on the property of any cemetery owned and or maintained by the city of Starkville, Mississippi, excluding service animals. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Let's just say except service animals to make it a little more clear.
Except service animals. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion, any discussion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, the measure clearly passes. Next matter you have before you is discussion and consideration of approving the 2% budgets for OCEDA and the CBP. Motion has been made by Alderman Vaughn to approve the 2% budgets for both the Oktibbeha County Economic Development Authority and the Convention and Visitors Bureau as presented. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
Yes, it is.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Vaughn, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion, any discussion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter you have before you is consideration of approving travel for the mayor, CAO.
So move.
Motion has been made by Alderman Vaughn to approve of the travel for the mayor, CAO, and aldermen that are interested in attending the 2015 MML Midwinter Conference to Jackson, January 27th through 29th, with advanced travel in an amount not to exceed $900 per attendee.
Mr. Mayor, before you get a second, I think this motion needs to specify what alderman's gonna go. I am not going, so I think it'd be good if we'll get that in the record so we can specify.
Would you like it to say any aldermen that are interested in attending with the exception of Alderman Perkins?
And any other alderman who is going with me? I know I'm not going.
I don't know if we have an actual count of everybody that is confirmed
Well,
that is
that'll
going
be fine.
at this point.
That'll be fine, Mayor, excluding Alderman Perkins.
All right, so Alderman Vaughn, the motion would be a motion to approve the travel for Mayor Wiseman, CAO Adams, and any alderman excluding Alderman Perkins that are interested in attending the 2015 MML Midwinter Conference in Jackson, January 27th through 29th. 2015 with advanced travel in an amount not to exceed $900 per attendee as presented. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Vaughn, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Discussion. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter you have before you is discussion and consideration of a street closure permit as requested by West Brothers Construction. And this is actually modified from the proposal that you have in your packet. We had a meeting yesterday with the contractor and with representatives from ERA. ERA stood to be most impacted by the proposed closure because your original closure had a proposal. Your original closure was proposed to be Meg Street completely closed for 6 months. Of course, ERA sits in the curve on Meg Street, so it was going to greatly limit their access. It has not been easy. Because there's just not very much room there at all. But in working over the past 2 weeks with the contractor, we have determined that there is barely enough room to keep Meg Street open for the 6 months of the project that it was going to be closed with barriers put up on the construction site. Would leave approximately 9.5 feet which is not much room at all for cars to pass through. But a car can pass through there, and the construction company believes safety would be adequate with barriers in between the construction site and that 9.5-foot drive lane. Now, guys, we have worked and worked and worked on trying to do something to alleviate issues on the block of Main Street that has to be closed from December 15th to January 19th. And there is just not much that can be done because the actual road has to be rebuilt. Part of it is turning into a roundabout in that portion of the street. Now, there is one small change that could occur. I will say both the construction company and our staff has some hesitancy about doing this, but only about half of that street has to actually be worked on. Is that the right dimension, Rob? So if you think of the block as a square, about half of the square is where the roundabout's going to be built. City engineer says it is possible. Construction company says it's possible to accommodate it, to block that street at the halfway point where they're going to be building the roundabout. The issue with this, in addition to the construction company being in a very tight space, is that there's going to be no place for cars to effectively turn around when they pull into the angle parking, because they can't go forward as they would before. So we would need to put signage on the site that essentially said something to the effect of park at your own risk. Alderman Maynard.
So if we cut half, that's the back half towards City Hall. So could we make,
That's available for parking, is that what you're asking?
no, the front half will be available for parking, right?
Correct, east half.
Could we temporarily stripe,
90-degree parking.
not angle parking, but straight parking in there? So you'd have, I guess there's probably, what, 6, 8 slots on there now?
There's 9, counting the handicap on our side.
So we'd have probably 3 plus a handicap straight in on either side.
You could probably allow 4 on each side. 4 on one side and 4 on another.
Right. I'm thinking leave one handicap.
Before
I
we
don't
get
know if
too
there's-
far along, Edward's shaking his head.
Well,
You have to realize that this is not an ideal situation. I mean, when they pull in here, there's really no good way to get out. The most ideal scenario would be to block it off at Washington intersection. That way the cars have to turn left or right, but if we allow it mid-block barricaded, then cars would go in there and park, and then they're either gonna have to back into the opposing lane or back out into the intersection, depending on how far the barricades are installed. You can put up temporary traffic striping, but I think it becomes potentially more confusing than it already is, which is gonna be very confusing to begin with. But to accommodate the businesses, if that's the best solution, then we will certainly try to make it as safe and as user-friendly as possible. But ultimately, it's gonna still be kind of confusing.
What if,
Alderman Walker.
what if we looked at, so when you're saying it's half a block, but Meg's is gonna be open, the one
Meg's
lane?
can't be open for the month because it runs into the block where they're going to be building the roundabout. But after that roundabout is complete, Meg's will be open again, and you'll have the roundabout where traffic can turn around at that point.
This is equally confusing, so it may not, but you could allow only one way on Meg's to come in from Lampkin and have back-end angled parking only?
Not while they're building the roundabout.
They'd have to cross the roundabout to get there.
In Alderman, there's also a storm, excuse me,
You may.
There's also a storm drain that's being built across Meg's at that point, and and granted, that's only a 3 to 5 day portion of the closure, but given the unpredictable nature of the weather through the month of December, we've got to hit that at the right time, right, Rob?
Right, but I mean, the plan is to do it while that block is down.
Right. But so that's the thing, we'll actually be trenching there across Meg's as part of the construction. But certainly we're open to wherever the board wants us to go and want to be as accommodating as possible for the businesses.
Alderman Vaughn.
Whatever do we got to make it safe? You said ain't about 9 what feet?
I don't know, about how many feet are we talking?
There's 2 different issues. One being the roadway going by the Methodist Church, by ERA. We will be, after January 15th, that roadway will be reopened, but there will be a concrete barricade between the City Hall project and the traveling public. That roadway will go down 6.5 feet, will be one way toward downtown. That's really phase 2 of the road closure, because that portion will be opened back up. Phase 1 includes closure from really the ERA driveway, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong here, ERA driveway up to Washington Street. That
build the road out, reconstruct the roadway, install the storm drainage, pour the curbing, that type of thing, during that 1 month period. So the 9.5 feet, to your question, Alderman, I believe that will be sufficiently safe. The traffic speed will have to be really low. Not a lot of large vehicles can come through there, but for general, access to businesses and traveling public that wants to go through that area to access businesses, I think it would be safe.
We're going to have great signage up and directions up for, make sure that we don't have no accident.
Absolutely, and I believe it'll be a safe solution for the construction workers working right there next to the road.
Well, is this gonna accommodate these, the vendors there?
Once we get to January 15th, the traffic flow will be greatly improved. The most time of disruption will be from December 15th to January 15th, when they're actually building around the and that's when they're gonna have to close a portion of Main Street in front of the Peter Pit area to build that roundabout. There's just very little way to get around that. Rob, you can talk a little bit about means and methods of your construction crew, scheduling, subcontractors and that type of thing if you want, but, it's just very, very difficult to do that without closing the road.
Alderman Maynard?
Do you feel comfortable in the 30 days? I mean, this is not a contractor 30 days, it's gonna get expanded out to 60 or 90 or.
This is what we picked, I mean, we know the dates we have to hit, we know the dates the traffic flows to leave, and that's what we're aiming for, so. The reason we shot at it, hopefully we'll do better. I think we don't have a choice to answer the question.
Is there any way to put an extra crew on and get it done quicker by working?
I mean, it's a limited amount of work and a limited amount of space, so, I mean, you'd be crawling with ants if you put an extra crew on, so productivity's not gonna go up by putting, I mean, this is equipment work, it's not labor-intensive work as far as man hours are concerned. You're not gonna get much bad.
Maybe recognize.
You may.
If the board approves this road closure, it is my hope that the contractor can move as expeditiously as possible. Over the years, I have heard so much about it's gonna take 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and it turns into eternity. These individuals who have come before us tonight have businesses, and I understand what it means to be able to get access to your business. This is their livelihood. And this road closure is going to affect, dollars and cents. That's the bottom line. So if the board does this, just like we did with the Carver Drive Road, we're going to get it open before school starts. And it turns from one thing to another. Now, if we close this road needs to be open, the work needs to be done, and the road needs to be opened up in a timely manner. Now, I'm not really in favor of closing this road, but it's very urgent and necessitous, as I see it, for the work to be done. But these business owners, whom we greatly appreciate for their presence in our city, need to have some complete assurances that this work is going to be done. Because if you can't assure us, I'm not going to tolerate it. Because in my almost 22 years here, people come out, well, it's going to get done in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. You get next year this time, it's still not done. Just like the Carver Drive Road, the contractor from wherever he's from, no disrespect to the location, I mean, it's supposed to have that road done way before school open, other projects throughout the city, in other wards. So, but in sympathetic to these business owners, the work needs to be done, like the gentleman from 5 said. If you can get another crew in here, and we appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much. I'm not giving you a hard time, but I'm just strict with business as always. So if you can get another crew in here and get this work done as quickly as possible, if you have to work at night, I mean, we need to get these roads open up. If you can get it done for Christmas time, we appreciate that. So, I mean, but this is something of grave importance. We don't want these businesses leaving our city. We don't want them relocating somewhere else. but Mr. Contractor, if you can do that, let me ask you this question. So are you representing to our mayor and this board and to these business owners and members of the public that you can get, in what period of time you can get this work done?
December 15th through January 19th.
So our roads will be open back up on January the 20th. That is what you're telling us?
Yes, sir.
You're not gonna be asking for no change order, or the weather it got was 50, 20 degrees, so you need another 30 days.
That's correct.
Okay. Mayor, I yield.
Mr. Mayor?
Alderman Little.
Rob, did y'all explore or discuss working like they'd mentioned earlier after hours at nights, on the weekends, and just to kind of help speed, if you could chop off a week would be huge. 10 days would be huge.
Certainly, and, I mean, as far as hours and weekends and that sort of thing is concerned, absolutely, that's something that we're gonna press, it's what we've done already. We're already working weekends on that project, we're already working from daylight to dark. I mean, that's what we do anyways. Trying to work at night on that particular style of work is very difficult to do. Number one, you're working in December and January at night. You're not gonna get a concrete batch plant to open up, to bring you a yard of concrete, 2 yards, 3 yards of concrete, much less you've got specifications that are 300% more costly to follow when it comes to pouring concrete in sub-freezing weather. So you've got those kind of issues that you can't deal with at nighttime in this time of year.
Thank you.
Alderman Walker.
Could we at least put some signage that, even though it may not be as convenient, to let people know that they can park at the courthouse just down on West Main, to at least be able to hopefully, a pedestrian can't get there?
You said the park.
You have to go around the other side.
Yeah, but you can get there from the other side, is that correct? You can come in from Lambkin and
You can get in off Connor as well.
yeah, you ought to be able to access that. And what about the Methodist parking lot? Is it gonna be at least pedestrian accessible from the Methodist parking lot that's across the street from the church to the business?
It's accessible by vehicle even during the closure of the block, because Megs will be open up to the ERA business, so even the parking lot across the street from the Methodist church will be accessible.
Well, we might have to get approval from the Methodist church, but I think some signage at both of those intersections to direct people to park to those lots that are trying to service the businesses right there might be at least something that we can do.
Can they walk through there from Methodist to our end of Main Street?
They stay on the sidewalk, that shouldn't be a problem. Storm drain the sidewalk, part of the sidewalk actually.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? We have no motion pending.
I make the motion that we reluctantly make the motion that we allow the work by West Brothers Construction to take place in the specified days as stated in the packet.
Excluding item 1, right? Item 1 was the closure from December 2nd to the closure project.
Yes.
So, Rob, items 2 and 3 would stand as requested, correct? Item 2 was Main Street will close from the intersection of Main Street and Washington to the intersection of West Main and the east entrance of the Octavia County Circuit Clerk's Office from December 15th, 2014 to January 19th, 2015. And what was previously request 3 was to prepare for future overlay and save the cost of milling. We will raise our curb heights along Meigs, Main, West Main, 1.5 inches, except curb inlets to avoid trapping water.
Would you want to amend 1 to close Megs only during that time as 2?
Okay, so you will have Meigs closed from December 15th to January 19th as
Through
well?
traffic, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so item 1 would be amended to read, Meg Street will close to through traffic from December 15th, 2014 to January 19th, 2015. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
All right, motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to approve of the street closure permit as requested by West Brothers Construction and as amended to read, Meg Street will close to through traffic from December 15th, 2014 to January 19th, 2015. Main Street will close from the intersection of Main Street and Washington Street to the intersection of Main Street and the east entrance of the Octavia County Circuit Clerk's Office from December 15th to January 19th. To prepare for future overlay and save the cost of milling, we will raise our curb heights along Meg Street and West Main Street approximately 1.5 inches, except at curb inlets to avoid trapping water. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Alderman Vaughn.
Well, let it accommodate you on any.
Except for the finances. It's gonna hit. No matter how you slice it, it's gonna hit.
We are strictly commissioned. If they can't get to us, they will not come to their door.
We spoke about weather. You think they're gonna park at the Methodist church and walk up to get their hair cut? Or they gonna go down where they park in front of it? I mean, is it gonna accommodate us better than 6 months? I'll thank you for that.
It is what I mean. We gotta get it done. I understand your frustration.
Will y'all state that there will be access for them to walk from the designated parking?
Yes.
I mean, I really appreciate the board's efforts, but there's got to be some way to, I mean, if construction's on, someone is gonna be reluctant to walk through it, period. They're gonna see barricades, they're gonna see signs, they're gonna see machinery, they're going to be reluctant. Every business owner has voiced their concern to you on this. I know it's inconvenient to work at night. I know it's December. I know it's freezing 24 hours. If it's gonna freeze, we're not gonna pour concrete anyways. We cannot guarantee it's gonna be 30 days. It's going to be weather involved in there. It's gonna be Christmas. We're gonna have guys out there working on Christmas and Christmas Eve and New Year's Day. I mean, guys, you're asking an awful lot of your downtown merchants. And I know I've already spoken, I'll bust you, I'm sorry.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Maynard's motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
All right, all those in
Nay.
favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor with 3 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is discussion and consideration of the travel for Joanna McLaurin for the 2014.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Vaughn to approve of the travel for Joanna McLaurin to the 2014 Municipal Clerk Educational Conference, December 17 through 19, 2014 in Jackson, Mississippi, with advanced travel not to exceed $200. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
Yes, that's it.
Do I hear a second? Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Vaughn, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Adams, is this job related?
Yes, sir, she has to have this, Ms. McClure, and board, this is, thank you for the opportunity. 2.5 years ago, you all allowed Ms. McClure to join the Municipal Clerk Certification Program. She's completed the coursework for that and has to attend the business meeting with the annual business meeting with the city clerk to complete that certification. And so we're pleased to announce that Joanna is finishing the municipal clerk internationally recognized certification with this class, and we thank you for your support of her through that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Saying none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter that you have before you is discussion and consideration of approving travel for Shantea Wilson to the 2014 Municipal Clerk Education Conference, December 17th through 19, and Jackson.
So move.
Motion has been made by Alderman Vaughn to approve of the travel for Chantea Wilson for the 2014 Municipal Clerk Educational Conference, December 17th through 19th in Jackson, Mississippi, with advanced travel not to exceed $600. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Walker. Alderman Vaughn, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Discussion. Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Adams, again, we stand. Is this travel request and conference job related?
In her duties as administrative assistant, no, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
I will remind you that you did put Miss Wilson in the deputy clerk program last year, and she is working towards certification. So,
I remember.
Yep.
Don't nobody remember, I remember.
Alderman Little.
Mr. Adams, in working toward that certification, can you receive the certification if you're not working in a clerk's capacity?
Alderman, this is where to answer your question, I need to ask her, we're getting into a personnel issue as it relates to her job description and whatnot. Do I need to answer that?
I would recommend, if you're going to take this discussion any further, that you take it into executive session. Alderman Wynn.
I move that we go into executive session, go into personnel matter.
Closed session first.
Closed session.
Alderman Wynn has made a motion to go into closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Alderman Wynn, is that your motion?
Yes, it is.
Do I hear a second? Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Wynn, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, well, you got a motion pending. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. At this time, we're going to clear the room to go into closed session. You got a motion pending right now. The clerk will now read the motions passed by the board in executive session.
It's a motion to deny the travel request of Chantea Wilson, and it did pass. A motion to no longer require Ms. Wilson to attend future board meetings unless specifically requested to do so by the mayor or a board member, which passed.
Could you read both motions?
I'm sorry. A motion to deny the travel request of Ms. Wilson, that did pass, and a motion to no longer require Ms. Wilson to attend future board meetings unless specifically requested to do so by the mayor or a board member.
All right, the next matter before you is a request for approval of a City Hall Certified Local Government Grant Program with the Carl Small Town Center for building drawings and professional assessment and.
So moved.
I'm not sure.
Oh, I missed the item that y'all added to the agenda. The next matter before you is the consideration and approval of a resolution to adopt the National Association of Transportation Officials Urban Street Design Guide and Urban Bikeway Design Guide as the official design guides for the street and bikeway improvement projects within the city of Starkville.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to approve of a resolution to adopt the National Association of Transportation Officials Urban Street Design Guide and Urban Bikeway Design Guide as the official design guides for the street and bikeway improvement projects within the city of Starkville as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Walker. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter that you have before you is the request for approval of a City Hall Certified Local Government Grant Program contract with the Carl Small Town Center for building drawings and professional assessment and land designation documents services not to exceed $17,550.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to approve of a City Hall Certified Local Government Grant Program contract with the Carl Small Sound Centers for building drawings and professional assessment and land designation document services not to exceed $17,555 as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Wynn. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is a request for approval of variance request for the Mr. Bubbles Car Wash Automatic Pay Station. Motion has been made by Alderman Little. The motion is to approve of a variance request for Mr. Bubbles Car Wash Automatic Pay Station as presented. Alderman Little, is that your motion? Do I hear a second? Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Little, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Alderman Maynard.
Mr. Sanders, this 5 feet seems awfully close to that bumper. Do you have any reservations about that at all?
No, we do not. In that, along the property line, on the west side of the car wash is a rather high level. There is an elevation difference, cross access. A representative representing the property owner was at the Board of Adjustments and Appeals hearing, and they had they didn't have any issues with what the applicant is proposing.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Next matter you have before you is a request for approval of variance request for the Habitat for Humanity lots with conditions. Discussion, Alderman Maynard.
Mayor, I move that we deny this variance request submitted by Habitat for Humanity, finding of fact that it would establish a precedent for further subdividing lots in that area. The new structure would not match the character or appearance of the existing homes in the area, and that the houses on the smaller lots could have a negative impact on price comparison of real estate in the area.
Now, Alderman Maynard, have you reduced that to writing?
Yes.
As you have reduced it to writing, you've passed it to city clerk. Without objection, I will not ask for it to be reread. Seeing none, do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
Yes, sir. This is a very small lot to begin with. I think trying to put 2 houses on this lot, even though this is a very worthwhile program and project, it's just gonna really cramp the area in that lot. There's just not big enough space. I think that lot is 0.2 acres, 0.28 acres, and as the whole lot, dividing it in half is just too small in my opinion. No further discussion.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is a request for approval to accept the low quote from JCV Construction in the amount of $10,050 for the Lafayette Street sidewalk and alley improvements. Alderman Maynard.
I make a motion that we accept that and adjust our original motion to increase the amount allowed by the $50.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to accept the low quote from JCV Construction Incorporated in the amount of $10,050 for the Lafayette Street sidewalk and alley improvements, and authorization for the mayor to proceed with executing a construction contract in an amount not to exceed a revised amount of $10,050. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Alderman Little.
Mr. Engineer, could you tell us, now, didn't this company bid earlier, like 15 something? Was there
Yes, sir.
something that?
The initial proposal scope included the steps down to Lampkin, the paving of the alley between this building and the attorney's office, paving in the back, which is adjacent to City Hall alley, and then redoing the front parking lot, front sidewalk along with the guardrail that matches down the Main Street guardrails. That quote, the low quote of that came in around $15,000 at that time. The board tabled it at the last meeting. So what we did is we went back and adjusted the scope and removed the guardrail
just to be clear, the scope of this work now is the repairing of the sidewalk and doesn't include the steps and the alleyway? So everything minus the guardrail?
Exactly.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter you have before you is a request for approval of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments. Motion has been made by Alderman Little. Alderman Little, was that you? Motion has been made by Alderman Little to approve of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments, including the Starkville Electric Department as of November 26th, 2014, for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2015, as presented. Alderman Little, is that your motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Little, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Alderman Perkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Adams, just very brief, the hour has gotten late, so I have my claim docket. It's got a lot of yellow markings on it, but we're not gonna go through that because I would be too long with it. But just want to say, want to appreciate what the department heads are doing, trying to cut back on the spending, but still there are a lot of areas where spending needs to be cut back, like with some of the special events. You know, for example, we appreciate what the fire chief is doing with the Pink Hills program, but you know, when we were told about that, we were told that we were invited and we can appear, but we were not told about the expenses. I think we spent a good bit of money on that, over, you know, a few $1,000s on that. There are a lot of purchases. I see what individuals go to the co-op and you know, just shop at random things like that, boots and other type things. And I know they have employees who have to do various jobs and assignments, but it looked like a lot of excessive things, like the fire department. There was a TV purchase, and you know, and I'm just too conservative to understand things like that would be done. And also too, I noticed I'm gonna have to mention this one about department. But I don't want to be long. I'm trying to move the meeting on. But my last thing I want to mention this evening, but just try to curtail the spending. But the last department is the electric department, where we had a consulting firm to come in. I think it's Atwell and Gant Consulting. I think we spent $2,500. But if we did that, I wonder why we'll be using that group. And I want to take Mr. Kemp's time just talk to him about that. But you can answer that question to me later. But if we're doing that, you know, do we have, real quickly, do we have engineers? Is Mr. Sullivan engineer over there?
Yeah, we have engineers on staff. We have Jason Horner, we have Mr. Kemp as our engineering staff there.
Okay, let me ask you real quick. Mr. Kemp, in about a minute or less, why do we need the Ghent firm to do any work?
Occasionally, right now, they're controlling, they actually have all of our CAD systems and all of our drawings. They're maintaining and updating that system. We don't have personnel to actually do all of that.
Yes.
And it grew out of a long-time arrangement that we've had with that engineering firm since way back in the years. And so we found it more economical for them to do that, put certain things on our sheets and prepare drawings that can be used as part of our capital project.
Yes, sir. And you know, if there's some things we can do, we just need to go ahead and do it in-house. One last thing, Mr. Adams, I see in one of the department, maybe public services, we're doing a lot of work with this contractor, Stidham.
Yes.
You know, and of course, I don't want to take a lot of time. This is all constructive, not criticizing anybody. We just in this family together trying to work for the best, okay?
Yes.
So Stidham, if there are some things that we can do in-house and save some money, because that has been appearing on the claims docket for a number of times. You know, there's some things that I think that our staff can do. So we just take a look at that, because I'm going to continue to monitor that. And hopefully this will make all of us be better as we spend the money that belongs to the taxpayers.
Yes, thank you, Vice.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just go over that with your staff. They're just a personal request. I'm not instructing you when you meet with your staff, so they can do better things to curtail the spending.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
We'll get on top of it. Thank you, Vice.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 5 in favor with 1 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is a request for approval of promotions in the police department to fill vacant positions in the rank of lieutenant and sergeant.
So moved, Mayor.
Motion has been made by Alderman Perkins to approve of promotions in the police department to fill vacant positions in the rank of lieutenant and sergeant. Alderman Perkins, that's your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Perkins, you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter you have before you is a request for authorization to hire a temporary full-time employee to fill in as secretary in the Sanitation and Environmental Services Department during the medical leave of an existing employee. Motion has been made by Alderman Carver to authorize the hire of a temporary full-time employee to fill in as secretary in the Sanitation and Environmental Services Department during the medical leave of an existing employee as presented. Alderman Carver, is that your motion? Do I hear a second? Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Carver, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter that you have before you is a request for authorization to purchase a new dare vehicle in the amount of $29,453.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to authorize the purchase of a new dare vehicle in the amount of $29,453 as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Saying none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter you have before you is a request for authorization to enter into an agreement with Homeland Security to purchase ceramic plates, carriers, gas masks, and filter SWAT patrol gear in the amount of $15,000. This is 100% reimbursable.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to authorize the city to enter into an agreement with Homeland Security to purchase ceramic plates, carriers, gas masks, and filter in the amount of $15,000 as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion? Do I hear a second? Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. You have now exhausted your open session material. You do have matters potentially for your discussion in executive session.
Move the meeting to be closed, Mr. Mayor.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard, or Alderman Perkins, to move into closed session to determine whether there's a need for an executive session. Alderman Perkins, that's your motion.
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Perkins, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Saying none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. At this time, I'll ask that the public clear the room so the board can begin closed session deliberation.
It's been a doozy.